basic organizations of CIS member states to 2 Russian educational facilities. They will take stock of the 2025 plan for multi-level inter-agency consultations within the CIS and the program of actions on stepping up partnership between foreign ministries of the CIS. The majority of the documents that will be endorsed are to be submitted to the heads of state and government of the CIS. On the 17th and 18th of April, Minister Lavrov will pay a visit to Turkey, the city of Antalya, upon the invitation of the Foreign Minister of Turkey to take part in the 5th Antalya Diplomatic Forum. The minister plans to deliver his address to the special session of the forum. He also plans to have bilaterals with foreign counterparts. They are to discuss key aspects of the international agenda, including the situation in the Middle East, South Caucasus, the Black Sea region, as well as relevant topics of relations with certain states. Moving on to the relevant international agenda, the situation in the Middle East and the Gulf. The comment on this topic will be manifold. It will have several parts in line with the developments that we have seen over the past 24 hours, and given the questions that we received from you, should you be willing to get some extra information, I would be happy to give it to you following the introductory remarks. On the 17th of April, the UNSC considered a draft on the Strait of Hormuz. It was submitted by the delegation of Bahrain. 11 members voted in favor. 2 countries, Pakistan and Colombia, abstained from voting. Russia and China voted against it. And as a result, the document was not adopted. The Bahraini document, if adopted, could make a dangerous precedent in international maritime law. It was non-balanced, it had loop-sided anti-Iranian language, and it had not mentioned the root causes of the developments in the Gulf, namely the US and Israeli aggression against Iran. We were concerned that the anti-Iranian resolution of the UNSC could damage a fragile mediated negotiating process on de-escalation. These discussions were discreet lately, and the reports on US-Iranian understandings on the ceasefire confirmed that we made the right decision on the Bahraini initiative. Russia proposes to focus on calls to swiftly put an end to the confrontation and to launch a full-fledged political and diplomatic process to settle the situation in the Gulf. The Russian delegation announced, as you might know, an alternative draft resolution on the 7th of April that seeks to achieve these goals. Let me once again draw your attention to the full-fledged address by Mr. Nebenza, Russian permanent representative to the UN. He outlined Russian approaches in general. He also gives a detailed overview of the draft submitted by Bahrain and the things that we're not happy about in this document and why we voted in the manner that we did. And certainly, I believe that the whole world observed the situation on the ground with a lot of concerns. We get a lot of questions asking us for comment. Russia welcomes the arrangement on cessation of hostilities between the US and Iran. From the first days of the destructive war unleashed by the US and Israel, Russia has been standing for the ceasefire and resuming political and diplomatic solution. We've been consistently working in this direction, including within the United Nations Security Council. We had close coordination with other responsible members of the international community, and certainly special praise should be given to the positive mediatory role by Islamabad. ahead of us is a serious effort to put an end to the conflict, respecting the rights and interests of all the regional stakeholders, and as a result, there should be no resumption of such military crises that are man-made, that are not provoked by anything. Long-term peace should be ensured, just like the security in the region, and we will continue to actively facilitate these means. I would also like to comment on the attacks on peacekeepers of the UN interim forces in Lebanon. They took place in end March. On the 29th and 30th of March, 3 Indonesian servicemen died, 5 persons were wounded. Such tragic cases, unfortunately, are not an exception. They are a follow-up to a deliberate number of attacks on peacekeeping missions. As you know, the UNSC members responded to this incident. On the 1st of April, there was a communique condemning this murderous incident. And naturally, we fully supported this statement. As a permanent member of the UNSC, we express condolences to the families of those who perished. We supported the mandate of the UN interim forces in Lebanon, and we emphasized the need to respect the inviolability and security of peacekeeping troops and facilities. And there is a call to the UN Secretariat to investigate the developments and to brief the international community, primarily the countries supplying troops. It also emphasized the need to completely implement the key resolution UNSC 1701 that regulates the state of affairs on the blue line between Israel and Lebanon, and it highlights firm commitment to sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We note that the Russian delegation took active efforts to ensure the adoption of the UNSC resolution, or rather the press communique, and we believe it is important to send a message supporting the blue helmets that virtually were attacked in southern Lebanon, including their location in Lebanon. We consistently draw the attention to the dangerous degradation of the situation in Lebanon, including the emergency humanitarian needs of the civilians amid the Israeli campaign and the threats of large-scale collapse and destabilization in the country. We believe that the destructive escalation of violence in Lebanon should not be factored in this overall regional crisis, because it is a result of an unprovoked armed aggression by the US and Israel in the Middle East. Basically, when it comes to the repercussions, not only policy-wise, but also these developments affected the global situation in the world, and a case in point is the report by the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. It issued the relevant report, Global Repercussions of the Conflict in the Middle East in Agricultural and Food Sector in 2026. We carefully studied this report, and by the way, the relevant reports were also published by the UNWFP, the UNDP, the UNCTAD as well. Basically, well, we can hardly say that they express a lot of concern. They rather make a lot of alarming forecasts regarding the repercussions of the reckless campaigns, just like we see
is of Masters of Engineering. As I didn't have a postgraduate
in case of the US and Israel in the region. The FAO document notes the central role of the Gulf countries in global energy system. It highlights that they are the key hub for the production and supply of nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers, primarily urea. We're talking about 30% of global supplies, and ammonia over 20%. The countries of the region account for 44% of global sulfur supply. And in this regard, clearly the conflict in the Middle East and limitations to the navigation through the Strait of Hormuz disrupted the raw materials supplies. Markets respond in a negative way, and we expect growing costs throughout the whole supply chain, including the work of the agricultural enterprises, transportation, irrigation, storage, and so on. There is a price hike on fuel, and probably there will be an outburst in demand on bioethanol and biodiesel, rape oil and soya oil, sugar cane as well. Emergency measures taken by the International Energy Agency, that released 400 million barrels of oil from its strategic reserves, can only ensure short-term effect for the prices, and therefore FAO urges to ensure alternative transport routes, because promptly normalizing the situation amid the hostilities that we've witnessed up until recently is something that was not possible. The situation is urgent because the countries that depend on the import of fertilizers do not have strategic reserves, and at the end of the day, this will have less harvest in the region, and the most affected are Bangladesh, Thailand, Sri Lanka. It all should have started in early April or May. On the 3rd of April, FAO published the updated food price index for March, and it continued to grow, amounting to 128.5 points, namely a growth by 2.4% has been a growth on all the major goods. At the same time, it is noteworthy to mention that thanks to the storage of grain, we managed to contain a price hike, and at the same time, the organization claims that it is premature to talk about a looming global food crisis, although we have very alarming trends. The main risks are related with the accessibility of energy and fertilizers. Would like to note the following thing. None of the organizations that I've listed before does not mention the root causes of the situation around the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about the unprovoked and unjustified aggression by the US and Israel, and the natural right of Tehran to self-defense, by all means accessible. The UN once again uses its textbook, and probably the assessments of the FAO experts regarding the developments in the food markets are quite moderate, well, at least for now, although let me once again stress that they clearly say that there is a trend and there is no attempt to hush up the repercussions of the reckless campaign that we're witnessing. Moving on to the situation around Ukraine, I wanted to start with an important announcement. On the 8th of April, all-style 235th anniversary of the accession of the peninsula of Crimea, since it joined our homeland. This followed a decree by Catherine the Great. We will dedicate a lot of materials in the upcoming days on this occasion. Please follow our accounts in social networks. But let me also note that there is another document, the federal law of 2018, and according to this law, the 19th of April is the day when Crimea, Taman, and Kuban became the part of the Russian Empire. Now moving on to the situation around the Ukrainian crisis and specific examples of what is happening there. The Kiev neo-Nazi regime does not cease terrorist attacks against civilians of Russia. It deliberately makes drone and missile strikes against non-military facilities, residential houses, social medical facilities, civil infrastructure. Throughout the last week alone, victims of the Western-encouraged terror by Ukraine totaled over 188 persons, including 11 minors. I understand that in the West, for many decades, they encouraged and not ignored such bastards as Epstein, and the West doesn't care about good treatment of children. Still, the world was shaken as it saw the real face of the collective West. Such people as Epstein made it to the elites there, and together with the ruling regimes, they were making democracy. After that, they could have seen something real when it comes to their treatment to children. 11 minors suffered from the attacks of the terrorist regime in Kiev throughout 1 week alone. Maybe it is already enough for the West to see things clear. 11 victims and 3 children that died. I've mentioned 188 persons. 25 were killed among them. Now I'd like to present you with specific numbers, facts, and places regarding what the Kiev regime has been doing in the Bryansk region. On the 31st of March, the Ukrainian armed forces made a deliberate strike using checkmate vampire systems on a regional center of Suzemka, Vladimir region. On the 7th of April, the drone attack in the Alexander region killed 2 adults and a child. There was also a 5-year-old girl, a daughter of those parents that were killed. She survived, but she got seriously injured. The Belgorod region, Ukrainian barbaric attacks killed 5 people, injuring 59. The DPR, on the 5th of April, the Ukrainians made a combined attack on Zuyev and Starobersh thermal power plant using graphite bombs to destroy high-voltage electrical equipment. This munition was used by the US in Iraq in 1991, and in 2003, they were used by the US.
And in Serbia, they were used by the US in 1999. On the 6th of April, in the center of Donetsk, 3 women were wounded by a drone strike in the center of Donetsk. Also, during a repeated attack, Yevgeny Bykovsky, Izvestia correspondent, was wounded. And yesterday we made comments on this situation specifically. In Zaporozhye, on the 31st of March, a dark day for residents of Vasilievka. Bomb strike against a residential area, 3 civilians killed, including a 12-year-old girl and 91-year-old woman. 4 people, including a 4-year-old child, were wounded. Also, there was an attack against the city's industrial zone, and Ukrainian drones targeted an ambulance. It was not empty. It was carrying a medical team who narrowly escaped death. And on the 1st of April, drones attacked the central clinical hospital of this region. A woman was killed and a medical worker was wounded. In Velika Znamenka, because of the strike, 7 children were wounded and 3 adults. In Novorossiysk, on the 5th of April, a Ukrainian drone struck an apartment building, and many apartments were damaged. In Lugansk region, private homes were attacked. An entire family was killed, parents and their 8-year-old child. On the 5th of April, an attack against Belarusianska mine in Lutugina district. Now the miners have been evacuated to the surface, but they were blocked because of the attack. In Kherson region, the Holy Dormition church was attacked. Icons were damaged. Iconostasis almost completely destroyed. Russian law enforcement agencies continue to gather evidence to prosecute Ukrainian militants and foreign mercenaries. Roman Rogozin is charged with the 2016 attack on the Russian embassy in Kiev. Bryansk terrorist attacks charges have been made against the 143rd Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade militants Vasil Login and Bogdan Svigun. A case has been opened against Oleg Dechevsky, a member of the 425th Separate Assault Regiment, and Vitaly Sobota, member of the 80th Separate Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Colonel Alexander Konev, commander of the 92nd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Alexander Krunichenko and Mykola Semenyuk and Sergei Semenyuk have been charged with committing a terrorist attack. They shot and killed a public figure, the head of the region. Those people admitted their guilt, and their cases have been sent to the local court. Russian investigators study the bodies of citizens who have been killed because of the Ukrainian aggression. The village near Lesnaya Dacha, 260 civilian bodies found with bullet wounds, shrapnel wounds, missing limbs. In this mass grave, approximately 300 more bodies could be present. And now regarding the children for whom, in words, the Kiev regime cares so much. What the Kiev regime does with Russian children, I have already mentioned that, and Mr. Miroshnik, who is in charge of the violations of the Kiev regime, he does that regularly. The facts of abuse and harassment and killing of children. Although we do not divide children, because for us every life of a child matters. But what the Kiev regime does with its own children, that they hate our children, as they say, someone else's children, it's clear, but what they do with their own children. From March the 26th to March the 29th, Zelensky toured the Persian Gulf. We have mentioned this during our briefing on the 1st of April. During his visit to Qatar, for some reason, he did not find expressions for gratitude to Doha for facilitating the reunification of at least 100 children with relatives in Russia. And the families reunited. Why didn't he find the words? Because it's about investment and energy resources. Yes, for that he's thankful. And for weapons supply, yes, you know why the Ukrainian citizens die. But when it's about children, and Zelensky not being able to monetize that immediately. But there is one more issue, this children's rights. Ukraine needs it only for propaganda on international platforms. And when he does not thank for reunification of families, children who come back to Russia, or children who find their relatives in Ukraine, constructive work should be admitted, and the fact that they were not stolen in Moscow but someone, but they were separated by hostilities and by the tragedy for so many years, unwinding before the eyes of its sponsors. Zelensky cannot admit that. To do something that could somehow not destroy but to put obstacles to his propaganda of a false myth. Neither children nor their prosperity are of interest to the Kiev regime. You can have a look at the National Social Service of Ukraine data on the situation of minors in Ukraine. It's about domestic violence in Ukraine in 2025. 585 children suffered from that. But a third of crimes, it's not about domestic violence, it's about crimes of sexual nature. In Ukraine, they have revealed the cases of systematic harassment, restrictions in food and abuse of guardianship rights, violations of sanitary and epidemiological requirements, industrial safety regulations, and inadequate care in different children institutions. In total, in 2025, almost 13,000 such violations were recorded in Ukraine. But they're just talking at international platform that Russia puts obstacles to their life, but it's their domestic problems. Just instead of getting some powerful solution, it's aggravated by lies that they present as the truth. Now it's about child trade in Ukraine, trade in children. 8 children were victims in 2025, 10 in 2024, 118 in 2023, and 3 children in 2022, according to the same National Social Service of Ukraine data. But actually, Ukraine is one of the leaders in illegal transplantation, and orphans are most vulnerable, who are often sent abroad under the guise of humanitarian actions, allegedly for their own sake, but then their traces are lost. Facts have been repeatedly published of illegal transfer of children to EU countries to the United States, including for adoption into LGBT families. In December 2025, the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine reported the uncovering of a criminal group involved in the illegal transfer of children to the West for so-called adoption by foreign citizens. In this regard, the issue of the return of evacuated children from the EU is urgent. That's according to the National Social Service of Ukraine. In 2022, 196, not children but orphanages, with 4,800.
हेलो myself सोनू
myself बिल्लू की GF और वो ला रहे हैं हमारे लिए बेस्ट वाला
ट्राई तो कीजिए यूपी स्पेशल है
धोखेबाज कुरकुरे की जगह तुम हमें कुछ भी खिला रहे थे
समझे बिल्लू नया कुरकुरे है यूपी का नंबर 1 टेस्ट
Foundation. Children transported to Europe and to Turkey, where they were deprived of proper supervision, physical and psychological abuse, and 2 girls became pregnant by local hotel workers. So that's charitable work by Elena Zelenska. And it's information from all over the world. Yes, they can tell the truth, but they keep silent about persecution of Russian-speaking children. On the 6th of April, Ukrainian education expert Ivana Kaberik reported that approximately 40,000, just imagine 40,000, children in Ukraine do not attend schools in Western Ukraine because they face ridicule and insults. It's not children quarrels, it's just the result, the consequences of the policy of language terrorism Ukraine is conducting. To avoid this, parents are trying to provide their children with the opportunity to somehow study remotely. The head of the Lviv City Council's Department of Education and Culture, Andriy Zikaluk, tried to deny those scandalous revelations. He said that conflicts could be possible in Ukraine, but urged not to generalize and not to present it as a mass phenomenon. Yes, of course, so many children, but it's not a mass phenomenon, allegedly. Who will we believe? A person who has said that this problem exists. It's of mass nature. Harassment on the basis of language, on national basis in Ukraine, and people who do not find common ground because they're children. So please do not invent those fake stories. We see this hatred of Russian language, pouring out of Ukrainian television and the officials, neo-Nazis and Banderites. Just watch our news, our TV channels. Can you find some program where we would mention impossibility to speak their mother tongue in Russia, for example, the Ukrainian language, or calls on the radio or in the press? If you hear a person speaking with an accent that reveals that the person is from the territory of Ukraine, have you heard any derogatory statements formed in the Russian mass media? Some derogatory abuse against nations, peoples residing in Ukraine? Have you heard anything like that? But we just mentioned that we are close peoples, that we have common history, that famous figures of education, culture, and science, they should not be divided. They had their own, their common motherland. In Ukraine, it's different. Actually, minors are not protected by the state there, because it's the Kiev regime that's not a state, it's a quasi-state. It just seems to perform those state functions, but state is about caring for citizens, caring for vulnerable groups of population, but the regime, it's a different thing. It's what is happening in Ukraine now. So the facts cited by us, the facts of violation, they just confirm that children are expendable for Kiev regime. Like adults who are hunted, who are tied to poles, who are beaten for having dared to ask for medicine in Russian, or to ask time in their own, in their mother tongue, in Russian. Their role is the role of cannon fodder in Ukraine, and minors are used for propaganda purposes. And they physically and psychologically abuse children. It's even in a more cruel way than the treatment of adults. So they should be telling them that they can be happy, not by hating someone, but by loving. They use the issue of children, first of all, to conceal their own crimes and crimes against children, includingly. They are hostages of the neo-Nazi regime, which does everything it can to cling to power, and endlessly, constantly, being insatiable and enriching itself. Now about the mobilization in Ukraine. Amid the growing losses among the Ukrainian armed forces, the mobilization plan has been raised from 30,000 to 35,000 people, and ordinary Ukrainians have already experienced this tightening of mobilization methods of this regime. Now we have testimonies. It just can be called, I beg your pardon, a human safari by the Territorial Center of Recruitment officials. Citizens are being hunted on the streets with their children in shops and cafes, in business and residential areas, in apartment and public areas. People taken from hospitals, from workplaces. People are maimed, beaten nearly to death, subjected to tear gas. Now this permissiveness of the
They had an agreement with the Ukrainian drone company. Systematic provocation.
Вот, например, показное недоумение в связи с набором тысяч непригодных в одну из частей ВСУ на днях попыталась разыграть так называемый военный омбудсмен Украины Ольга Решетилова. В свою очередь, уполномоченный Верховной Рады по правам человека Дмитрий Любенец на примере ситуации в Ужгороде фактически признал проблему поголовного отлова украинцев и их незаконного длительного нахождения на сборных пунктах в антисанитарных условиях. Людей сначала держат как скот, а потом отправляют на убой. Во многих селах, малых городах Украины, центральных, восточных, юго-западных областей этой страны уже практически и мужчин-то не осталось. Но этого украинским военкомам мало. Нет, не тем, кто там работает, а тем, кто там отдает приказы, преступные приказы киевского режима, за которыми, конечно, стоят западники с их деньгами и оружием. Теперь на Украине намерены рекрутировать женщин. Все больше украинок без медицинского военного образования обнаруживают себя в списках, кого бы вы думали, уклонистов. Ссылки на технические сбои, удручающие системные и больше похожи на подготовку массового сознания к повальной мобилизации женщин. Не случайно в публичных местах стали появляться плакаты и даже такие большие билборды с лозунгом «Защита Украины – женское дело». Конец цитаты. Об этом свидетельствует и недавнее заявление генерал-майора ВСУ в отставке Сергея Кривоноса о том, что наиболее эффективный способ пополнения рядов боевых подразделений регулярной армии Украины – это вовлечение женщин, особенно тех, чьи мужья, до чего же он договорился, чьи мужья погибли или воюют. Известно, что в некоторых областях с ведома полиции под видом военкомов орудуют просто переодетые в форму бандиты, которые угрожают пойманным гражданам отправкой в ТЦК в случае отказа, например, заплатить откуп. Треть полученных средств криминальные группировки оставляют себе. Оставшейся частью делятся, конечно, с региональными и центральными властями, которые опекают этот бесчеловечный бизнес. 6 апреля газета «Экономическая правда» сообщила, что вокруг ТЦК и военно-врачебных комиссий давно сложилась система платных услуг по уклонению от украинской мобилизации. Согласно прейскуранту, который был приведен, дешевле всего от 300 до $2000 обходится удаление своей фамилии из списка разыскиваемых уклонистов. Так называемый иммунитет от повестки и откуп от сотрудника украинского ТЦК, который пытается схватить рекрута, стоит от 4 до 6 тысяч $. Самой дорогой услугой является оформление инвалидности с правом выезда за границу. Ее стоимость на Украине достигает 50 тысяч $. Издание отмечает, что чем выше риск оказаться в ВСУ, тем дороже становятся подобные незаконные схемы. Безразличие киевского режима к собственному народу не добавляет населению Украины мотивации с оружием в руках защищать не Украину, а коррумпированный киевский режим. Стабильно высоки не только показатели уклонения от службы на Украине, но и дезертирств. Как признаются штатные военные психологи, украинцы бегут из учебных частей ВСУ автобусами или бросают оружие в первом бою. Что-нибудь, как-нибудь, лишь бы оттуда убежать. Одновременно среди населения растет сопротивление насильственной украинской мобилизации. Люди начинают организованно давать, буквально отпор тем самым полицаям из украинских ТЦК, вплоть до применения холодного огнестрельного оружия и даже боевых гранат. Они, как вы понимаете, легко попадают в тыл с фронта, учитывая, что на Украине происходит. Я бы сказала, с контролем, а на самом деле с бесконтрольным распространением оружия. Все вышеперечисленные факты подтверждают актуальность задач по денацификации и демилитаризации Украины и устранению угроз, исходящих с ее территории. И, как заявляло неоднократно российское руководство, все они будут выполнены. Мы сегодня говорили, как и каждый брифинг на протяжении многих лет, мы приводим примеры того, как по языковому принципу третируют. Сегодня я рассказывала, сколько детей страдает на Украине от того, что над ними издеваются, потому что они говорят по-русски, потому что они используют русский, как они и должны использовать, как родной язык. И вот я сегодня также говорила, а мы об этом говорим с вами тоже регулярно, о безмолвстве Запада, который просто выписывает очередные счета на вот это безумие киевского режима. Можно было бы подумать, что Запад, ЕС, США, Канада – это такие, знаете, новые спартанцы, которым все равно, которые жестокие, жестосердечные и не чувствуют той боли, которую испытывают люди, в принципе, которым отказано в обращении к ним на родном языке или уже теперь отказано даже в использовании родного языка. Что, мол, они не понимают, почему это неправильно, потому что сами не сопереживают, лишены ли эмпатии или просто не понимают, о чем идет речь. Но нет. Вот тут очень интересный случай произошел в Канаде, которая так вовлечена во все украинские события, безусловно, так поддерживает киевский режим. Так вот, посмотрите, этот скандал разразился вокруг видеообращения генерального директора крупнейшего перевозчика Air Canada Майкла Руса. Он высказал соболезнования по поводу авиационного происшествия с самолетом этой авиакомпании в Нью-Йорке. Напомню, 22 марта самолет, который следовал рейсом из Монреаля, столкнулся с пожарной машиной в аэропорту Ла-Гвардия. В результате погибли 2 пилота, еще 13 человек, которые находились на борту, получили ранения. С своей стороны, конечно, мы выражаем тоже родным и близким погибших и пострадавших соболезнования. Так вот, в данном сюжете примечательно то, что в своем выступлении Майкл Рус говорил на английском языке, употребив лишь 2 французских слова. «Бонжур» в начале своего обращения и «мерси» в конце. Ведь на Air Canada распространяется действие канадского федерального закона об официальных языках, так называемый Official Languages Act. Согласно этому документу, перевозчик обязан обеспечивать доступ к своим услугам и коммуникациям на 2 языках, английском и французском. Эту норму Майкл Руссо явно нарушил, что и послужило поводом для чего, как вы думаете? Для общенационального скандала в Канаде. То есть, не найдя, не то, что они не поняли, конечно, все поняли, а не найдя слов на французском языке в тексте, который они, конечно, поняли по-английски прекрасно, но исходя при этом из буквы и духа закона Канады, народ этой страны сказал о том, что так себя вести нельзя. Глава кабинета министров Канады, вы подумайте, то есть это не просто как-то скандал там, не знаю, в социальных сетях или какие-то обращения канадцев к авиакомпании были задействованы. Глава кабинета министров Канады Марк Карни осудил решение записать обращение исключительно на английском языке и назвал его, как вы думаете, как? Ну, это, я считаю, конечно, высший цинизм. Высший цинизм. Он назвал обращение, записанное только на одном английском языке, лишенным чувств и сострадания. Ничего премьер-министру нынешнему Канады, ничего премьер-министру ушедшему Канады никогда не мешало всячески поддерживать финансово, материально, военным способом киевский режим, который многие годы не то что не дает возможности официальные документы переводить или публиковать на родном для большинства граждан Украины русском языке, а который третирует и травит своих собственных граждан за то, что они даже на улице на этом языке разговаривают. Еще раз повторю, для себя родном русском языке. Глава кабинета министров Канады Маккарни также подчеркнул, что заявление не соответствовало, я боюсь за вашу сейчас эмоциональность, заявление не соответствовало ожиданиям страны, где языки Шекспира и Мольера имеют, как он сказал, равный статус. Вот знаете, если бы речь шла о премьер-министре той страны, того государства, которое знать не знал, и уж тем более никаким образом не был вовлечен бы в ситуацию вокруг Украины, я бы могла понять. Но действительно нету дела тому или иному государству, тому или иному политику до того, что происходит на другом континенте, заняты своими проблемами, дома разбираются, наводят порядки или, так сказать, пресекают беспорядки. Но это же Канада. Это та самая Канада, которая многие годы рукоплещет киевскому режиму, будь то это Зеленский, будь то это Порошенко или вся эта другая Тягнебок, Яценюк бригада, и выдает индульгенцию на каждый шаг, на каждый акт. И мало того, индульгенцию выдает, еще и деньги под это выдает. А тут, оказывается, видите, как важно с их точки зрения соответствовать ожиданиям страны, где языки, ну, в их случае Шекспира и Мольера, а в случае Украины, наверное, Гоголя и Пушкина. Я думаю, правильно будет сказать. А может быть, Булгакова и Толстого, а может быть, да можно десятки, сотни, тысячи авторов приводить, имеют равный статус. И мало того, ведь последние годы, последние месяцы, посмотрите, сколько всяких законов и актов на Украине принято было, на той самой Украине, которая живет в том числе на канадские подачки, материальную помощь, поддержку и так далее, против родного для миллионов людей, граждан Украины. Отдает приказы, преступные приказы киевского режима, за которыми, конечно, стоят западники с их деньгами и оружием. Теперь на Украине намерены рекрутировать женщин. Все больше украинок без медицинского военного образования обнаруживают себя в списках, кого бы вы думали, уклонистов. Ссылки на технические сбои, удручающие системные, для миллионов людей, граждан Украины, отдает приказы, преступные приказы киевского режима, за которыми, конечно, стоят западники с их деньгами и оружием. Теперь на Украине намерены общенациональные дискуссии. Ну и, конечно, не просто гневного порицания, но и вытекающих отсюда последствий. Да, вот такое двуличие. Двуличные, двуязычные двурушники. Но вопрос, конечно, в том, все ли канадцы. Ответ для меня очевиден. Конечно, не все. Но те, кто больше всего, так сказать, рьяно поддерживает киевский режим, безусловно, не может не понимать того, насколько они там заврались. И, как обещала на прошлом брифинге, отдельный материал мы подготовили о нарушениях странами Запада норм международного морского права. В гибридной войне, которую Запад развязал против России, одним из главных направлений становится ограничение доступа нашей страны к стратегическим морским коммуникациям для доставки российских энергоносителей и повышение издержек, связанных с их транспортировкой. Если сначала подрывные действия западников были сосредоточены на Балтике, то после принятых военно-морским флотом России мер по сопровождению гражданских судов их усилия распространились на Ла-Манш и Средиземное море. Суда, которые перевозят российские энергоносители, повсеместно признаются субстандартными и причисляются к якобы некому теневому флоту. Хотя всего несколько лет назад эти же суда находились, если можно так сказать, в белых списках как соответствующие самым высоким стандартам. Цель спекуляции с термином, с так называемым термином, берем в кавычки, теневой флот, определение которого, в принципе, напомню, отсутствует в международном праве, заключается в том, чтобы обосновать введение дискриминационных мер в отношении упомянутых судов, включая их задержание. Под надуманными предлогами, включая нарушение якобы международных, это, естественно, все придумано, санкций, которые на самом деле введены Европейским Союзом, такие государства, как Франция, Бельгия, Швеция, Финляндия, Эстония и Германия, подвергают досмотрам и задержаниям суда, которые отвечают всем, подчеркну, всем критериям свободного и беспрепятственного судоходства. Недавние инциденты с танкером «Этера», который был захвачен бельгийцами в координации с французами в исключительной экономической зоне Бельгии, сухогрузом «Кафе», танкером «COI», которые были задержаны шведами в их территориальном море, танкером «Дейна», он был захвачен французами в координации с британцами в открытом море. Это прямое тому подтверждение. Запад пытается объяснить свои действия тем, что суда без флага якобы не могут пользоваться свободой судоходства и должны быть задержаны. Примечательно, что суда под фальшивыми флагами, которые действуют в интересах самих европейских государств, почему-то под такие рестрикции не подпадают. Главное не флаг, а место назначения, как мы теперь поняли. Если нефть предназначена для европейцев, для ЕСовцев, на чем она перевозится в данном случае, не будет иметь значения, просто не будет вообще никаких оснований для задержания таких судов, и европейские власти не найдут никаких нарушений, даже смотреть ни на что не будут, лишь бы только получить искомые, ожидаемые энергоресурсы. Ощущается давление на государство флага судов, работающих в российских интересах, чтобы те в случае осмотра и захвата суда отказывались от подтверждения наличия у него флага, лишая таким образом это плавсредство национальной принадлежности и оправдывая этим факт его задержания. Внесение российских судоходных компаний в санкционные списки, запреты на заход в порты для судов под российским флагом, объявление судов под иностранными флагами, перевозящих российские углеводороды, неким теневым флотом, все это является нарушением международного права и, в частности, Конвенции ООН по морскому праву 1982 года. Запад активно пытается переформатировать под себя правовую базу с тем, чтобы развязать руки своим силовикам. Ряд стран с недружественными режимами, в частности Эстония, Польша, Финляндия, Нидерланды, разрабатывают законопроекты и принимают законы с целью расширения полномочий компетентных органов по обеспечению безопасности мореплавания. Однако фактически подобные некие новеллы направлены на неправомерное с точки зрения международного права ограничение свободы судоходства. 15 декабря 2025 года, как вы помните, была принята декларация Европейского Союза по вопросу, прямая цитата, задействования в полном объеме международного морского права в связи с угрозами со стороны, опять же берем это в кавычки, теневого флота и необходимостью защиты критически важной подводной инфраструктуры. Конец цитаты. 26 января текущего года 14 прибрежными государствами Балтийского и Северного морей было подписано письмо с призывом к членам мирового сообщества соблюдать международное морское право, включая Конвенцию 1982 года и конвенции, принятые под эгидой Международной морской организации. Налицо нежелание западников признать, что первопричиной обозначенных в их документах угроз, в том числе для целостности международной морской торговли и экологической безопасности, являются вводимые ими же односторонние ограничительные меры, которые сами по себе противоречат международному праву. Все это свидетельствует о продолжаемом Западом поиске способов создания помех свободе судоходства. Поскольку действующее международное право необходимых рецептов не содержит, западники вынуждены действовать, можно сказать, творчески, неуклюже, лучше сформулировать это, подгоняя существующие рамки под свои интересы и прибегая все к новым неправовым методам. Такие действия Запада подрывают основополагающие нормы международного морского права, чреваты запуском эффекта домино и могут привести к фактической остановке системы глобальной морской торговли. Последствия затронут ведь всех, как западных зачинщиков, так и развивающиеся страны, особенно те из них, для которых жизненно важна морская логистика, не говоря уже об угрозе, которую такие действия могут представлять для международного мира и безопасности. Российская Федерация призывает международное сообщество занять принципиальную позицию в поддержку режима Конвенции 1982 года, а государство флага не поддаваться неоколониальному диктату, объединиться в защите своих законных интересов и добросовестных морских перевозчиков. В Москве уверены в том, что мировое большинство осознает все угрозы и риски, связанные с попытками стран Запада превратить морские просторы в зону конфронтации, добиться единоличного контроля над морскими коммуникациями и лишить страны мира источника развития. Серьезную тревогу также вызывают террористические нападения на торговые суда со стороны киевского режима, которые происходят с молчаливого, а порой и даже и не молчаливого согласия западных стран, которые считают, что подобные инциденты, как они там формулируют, видимо, в некой степени допустимы в условиях вооруженного конфликта. Один из последних инцидентов, так называемых, это атака беспилотными системами на СПГ танкер «Арктик Метагаз» под российским флагом. Как вы знаете, все это произошло 3 марта в Средиземном море. Эта ситуация показывает, что география атак вышла за пределы театра военных действий и продолжает расширяться, ставя под угрозу морские перевозки в различных районах Мирового океана. В результате упомянутого нападения Арктик Метагаз лишился хода и перешел в свободный дрейф. Хладнокровное и методичное направление в торговое судно сразу нескольких безэкипажных катеров и беспилотных летательных аппаратов очевидно свидетельствует, что целью нападавших было уничтожение судна и экипажа, а также возникновение экологического бедствия. Совершенно вопиющее нарушение международного права. Ни одно европейское государство не осудило подобные действия своих украинских подопечных. В этом случае Европа становится не просто молчаливым свидетелем, но и непосредственным соучастником бесчинств киевского режима. Внимание заслуживает публикация издания Intelligence Online от 31 марта текущего года. В ней рассказывается об использовании военной разведкой Украины и ее подразделением группы 13, которое специализируется на скрытых морских операциях, сухогруза для охоты на так называемый, как они это формулируют, теневой флот России в Средиземном море. Судно, специально оборудованное для применения морских дронов, может наносить удары по судам в Средиземном море, используемым для экспорта российских углеводородов. Сухогруз ходит под удобным флагом, выглядит как обычное грузовое судно, которое курсирует между Черным и Средиземным морями. В публикации также сообщается, что, опять же, прямая цитата из этого материала, атака на российский газовоз стала первой подобной операцией за пределами Черного моря и ознаменовала сдвиг в операциях Украины в сторону Средиземноморья, которое, судя по всему, может превратиться в новый очаг напряженности. Отсутствие адекватной оценки происходящего, безусловно, становится причиной распространения практики вооруженных нападений на гражданские суда и дальнейшего попрания норм международного права в области недопущения незаконных актов, направленных против безопасности гражданского судоходства. Необходимо активное обсуждение всех произошедших инцидентов в профильных международных организациях. При этом на различных международных площадках, включая Организацию Объединенных Наций, Международную морскую организацию, те же европейские государства, в частности Британия, Франция, лицемерно продвигают документы, осуждающие нападения на торговые суда в Ормузском проливе. То есть что же это уже за двойные стандарты? 18-19 марта текущего года состоялась внеочередная сессия Совета Международной морской организации. Она, как вы, наверное, может быть, даже и не догадываетесь, была созвана, ее созывала Британия, а также Египет, Катар, Марокко, Объединенные Арабские Эмираты, Саудовская Аравия, Филиппины и Франция. И делали они это для рассмотрения ситуации в Персидском заливе, Аравийском море и Оманском заливе. Представительство России при этой организации использовало эту возможность, чтобы заявить о беспрецедентных нападениях и задержаниях гражданских судов в Средиземном, Балтийском и Черном морях, а также Атлантическом океане. И особый акцент был сделан на ситуации с российским газовозом «Арктик Метагаз». Россия продолжит обращать внимание мирового сообщества и работать активно в практическом плане для того, чтобы наконец-то, опять же, и теоретически, и практически до мирового сообщества дошла простая мысль о недопустимости нарушения норм международного морского права, для того, чтобы объяснить это не только используя, так сказать, правовые терминологические возможности, но и непосредственные наглядные примеры таких нарушений. Ну и, конечно, будем использовать все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении политические, правовые и иные инструменты для обеспечения уважения принципа свободы судоходства. Еще одна дата, которая должна, наверное, была бы отмечаться в иной атмосфере и по-другому. 6 апреля 1992 года, а именно 34 года назад, были установлены дипломатические отношения между Российской Федерацией и Республикой Молдова. На протяжении практически всего этого периода сотрудничество между нашими странами шло по-настоящему по восходящей. Был налажен активный политический диалог на высшем, высоком уровнях, развивались торгово-экономические связи, которые достигли своего апогея к 2020 году. Плотное взаимодействие поддерживалось между правительством России и Молдавии, а с 1996 года работала межправкомиссия по экономическому сотрудничеству. В ее рамках готовились и, конечно, реализовывались важные двусторонние проекты в торгово-экономической и гуманитарной областях. Всего состоялось 16 заседаний упомянутой комиссии. А последнее прошло 2 октября 2020 года. Регулярно происходила сверка часов по линии парламентов, министерств и ведомств. Активные консультации по широкому кругу вопросов проводились между министерствами иностранных дел, укреплялись межрегиональные связи. Была сформирована солидная двусторонняя договорно-правовая база. Она насчитывала почти 70 действующих межгосударственных и межправительственных соглашений, а также 17 соглашений о торгово-экономическом, научно-техническом и культурном сотрудничестве. Конструктивное взаимодействие между нашими странами, конечно, осуществлялось не только в двустороннем формате, но и многостороннем, в первую очередь, конечно, в рамках СНГ. В 2021 году в торговле Молдавия, Россия занимала 2-е место среди всех стран мира. Двусторонний товарооборот тогда составлял 1,3 миллиарда долларов. Рост ВВП Молдавии за период с 2011 по 2021 года достиг почти 41%, причем 2 процентных пункта за счет участия республики в интеграционных процессах в рамках СНГ. Как видно, и как вы видите, учитывая, что я привожу конкретные факты и данные, прагматичный подход Кишинева к выстраиванию отношений с нашей страной, участию в СНГ, приносил Молдавии вполне себе ощутимые, неплохие, даже очень хорошие дивиденды. Ну вот, к власти, слово «пришла» подойдет, к власти была подкинута группа, которая руководила Санду. В конце 2020 года эти самые прозападные силы были действительно подкинуты Молдавии. И ситуация в официальных отношениях между нашими странами изменилась она кардинальным образом, только она как бы не сама по себе изменилась, ее изменили те, кого Запад подбросил молдавскому народу. Я подчеркну еще раз, нет, это все произошло не по нашей инициативе, и мы делали все и продолжаем делать все для того, чтобы показать и доказать всю убийственность подобного курса Санду. Простые молдаване по-прежнему, рядовые граждане Молдавии, по-прежнему в большинстве своем дружески относятся к России, не видят в ней врага, которого рисует им этот самый кишиневский нынешний режим. Нет, не разворот Молдавии на Запад, так это нельзя назвать, а такой настоящий шиворот на выворот задом наперед, который исполняет режим Санду, не замедлил сказаться самым негативным образом на молдавской экономике и больно ударил по гражданам страны. Почему я говорю, что это не разворот Молдавии на Запад? По одной простой причине. Он бы давал этот разворот со стороны Запада какие-то профициты, какие-то бы результаты позитивные для Молдавии. Но нет. И самое главное, что получается, это не то, что Молдавия разворачивается, она как бы отказывается от самой себя, от своей истории, от своей экономики, от своей промышленности, производства. Она делает все не для того, чтобы реализовать национальные интересы народа Молдавии, для того, чтобы переформатировать народ Молдавии. Вот это уже не молдавский язык, а румынский. Вот уже это не граждане, так сказать, Молдавии, молдаване по национальности, а теперь якобы румыны и так далее, и так далее, и так далее. Все это действительно больно очень ударило по гражданам этой страны. С 2021 года товарооборот между нашими странами по даже не то чтобы инициативе, а в связи с соответствующей политикой, которую проводили вот эти самые прозападные силы во главе с Санду, упал более чем в 4 раза. При этом, вопреки надеждам Кишинева, компенсации потерь за счет рынка Европейского Союза, конечно, не произошло. Почему? Да потому что Европейский Союз давным-давно никому ничего не компенсирует. Ему бы кто-нибудь, этому Европейскому Союзу, что-то компенсировал. Дефицит торгового баланса Молдавии превысил 7 миллиардов долларов. Это сопровождается ростом цен и тарифов, инфляцией, массовым обнищанием молдавского населения и его исходом из страны в поисках лучшей доли. Почему? За что такое наказание молдаванам? Ну, наверное, тут без патетики. Просто потому что те страны, которые уступают в борьбе за свой суверенитет, превращаются в очередной инструмент в руках Запада по реализации своих геополитических амбиций. Вот такова цена русофобии. Хотелось бы верить, что в Кишиневе найдут силы ее преодолеть. Россия уважает, в отличие от Запада, суверенитет Республики Молдова и выступает за равноправный, взаимоуважительный диалог на благо народов наших стран. Мы неоднократно к этой теме обращались, но учитывая приближающуюся дату, я хочу еще раз уже в новом аспекте, так сказать, вернуться к этой теме. День памяти жертв геноцида советского народа впервые мы будем отмечать 19 апреля текущего 2026 года. И в преддверии приближающейся даты, дня, который был установлен президентом России в декабре 2025 года, мы продолжаем всесторонне освещать эту важнейшую проблематику, в том числе делаем это и на цифровых ресурсах.
समझे बिल्लू नया कुरकुरे है यूपी का नंबर 1 टेस्ट
Дипломатической работе, которую осуществляют наши дипломаты за рубежом на площадках международных организаций. Совместно с нашими партнерами из Российского военно-исторического общества, Национального центра исторической памяти при президенте Российской Федерации мы размещаем исторические материалы о преступлениях нацистов, их пособников в период Великой Отечественной войны 1941-1945 годов. Речь идет в первую очередь об архивных материалах, в том числе публикуемых в такой обширной подборки впервые, а также о систематизации знаний, о геноциде и связанных с ним фактов и многочисленных свидетельств. В наших аккаунтах в социальных сетях почти на ежедневной основе под хэштегами «Без срока давности», «Архивы говорят» мы проводим информационную кампанию по продвижению исторической правды и увековечиванию памяти жертв нацистского геноцида. Публикации переводятся на иностранные языки, становятся доступными также и для зарубежной аудитории, которая в большинстве, или о большинстве, лучше, наверное, так сказать, из приведенных фактов даже и не слышала. Также продолжаем наполнять статьями, документами тематические разделы на веб-портале Министерства иностранных дел России. Нет, это не просто история, это память, которая имеет прямую проекцию на события сегодняшнего дня. Как никогда актуальна известная фраза «Кто не помнит своего прошлого, обречен пережить его вновь». О бесчеловечных преступлениях нацистов, а также последовавшем крахе Третьего Рейха обязаны помнить те, кто сегодня вновь милитаризирует Германию. Например, не только ее, но ее, наверное, в первую очередь. О зверствах гауляйтеров и охранников концлагерей должны помнить во всех странах, особенно в парламенте той самой Канады, чтобы потом не аплодировать тем, у кого руки по локоть в крови невинных жертв. О преступлениях нелюдей, бандеровцев с упоением резавших, убивавших, сжигавших, в том числе женщин и детей, так как это сейчас делают их последователи, но нацисты киевского режима, обязаны помнить поддерживающие террористический режим Зеленского европейцы тем, кто в угоду конъюнктуре обо всем этом предпочитает либо забыть, либо активно не знать. Мы им будем напоминать историческую правду. Следите за нашими ресурсами и делайте все от вас зависящее. Я сейчас говорю и представителям средств массовой информации, и гражданам, согражданам, и, конечно, соотечественникам, чтобы популяризировать эту информацию. Вот, кстати, относительно преступлений против нашей страны и нашего народа в те годы. В МИД России поступили новые сведения о преступлениях военнослужащих милитаристской Японии, совершенных в период Второй мировой войны на Дальнем Востоке. Мы не устаем повторять, что такие бесчинства не имеют срока давности, а процессуальные действия с целью наказания всех виновных продолжаются по сей день. Генеральная прокуратура Российской Федерации в марте текущего года официально уведомила о принятии постановления об отмене вынесенных ранее заключений о реабилитации 34 японских граждан подданных. Полный список будет доступен в текстовой версии брифинга. В годы войны и даже после капитуляции Японии в 1945 году они были вовлечены в антисоветскую диверсионную шпионскую деятельность. Они совершали преступления против человечности. Я скажу сегодня об этом. Каким-то образом наберитесь, нет, нетерпения, воли все это прослушать. Это очень непросто. По результатам пересмотра судебных решений в кассационной и надзорной инстанциях установлено, что указанные лица реабилитации не подлежат, и их вина полностью доказана. В ходе брифингов мы уже неоднократно давали информацию, предоставляли факты об отмене решений о реабилитации японских военных преступников. В этой связи у многих мог возникнуть закономерный вопрос: в чем смысл этих мероприятий, осуществляемых российской правоохранительной системой? Можно много говорить о том, что такие преступления не имеют срока давности. Это действительно так. Именно так называется специальный информационный проект, посвященный доведению до широкой общественности фактов о геноциде народов Советского Союза, день памяти которого мы будем, как мы уже с вами сегодня говорили, впервые отмечать на государственном уровне 19 апреля. Но я хотела бы привести более актуальный пример, как нельзя лучше отражающий востребованность и актуальность такой работы. 1 апреля текущего года глава европейской дипломатии, вот та самая Кая Каллас, вновь повторила абсолютно бредовое заявление о том, что за последние 100 лет Россия якобы напала на 19 стран мира. Конкретных примеров она, конечно, не привела. Я вообще не уверена, что она может по памяти вообще какие-то 19 стран назвать, не совершив ошибку. Но ведь набирают процессы и в той же самой Японии, где в этот самый разжигаемый с другой стороны в Европейском Союзе вот этот миф тоже как бы начинают вовлекаться. По крайней мере, официальная японская историография в своих безумных попытках переписать историю с целью подвести идеологическую базу под становящийся все более очевидным курс на ремилитаризацию страны и пересмотр итогов Второй мировой войны активно продвигают эту же научную теорию. Оставим за скобками тот факт, что только в период с 1932 по 1940 год японские военнослужащие 891 раз нарушали границу СССР, осуществили 433 обстрела советской территории, советских судов, забросили 50
human rights activists and watchdogs, all those movements all around the world who seek to protect the historical memory, not to ignore that. You should join hands and you should give the relevant assessment to that, and you should fight against that. Robert Rojestensky wrote something genius. The living need that, not the dead ones. It is needed to those who will come to the future world, because if you forget about that, and if you allow these blasphemous acts and barbaric actions to gain the upper hand, the history has already told us what happens to these people, and to these peoples, they disappear. On the 25th of March, in the city of Langside, in Lao, PDR, there was a ceremony concluding the 8th stage of the demining campaign by the armed forces of the Russian Federation and the engineer troops of Lao PDR. In his address, Deputy Defense Minister of Lao PDR, Hong Tong-Sukwon, praised the work of Russian experts, expressing hope that there will be continued cooperation with our country on this track, because it bears very useful results for Laos. There's a problem with contaminating a great part of Lao PDR with explosive objects. Let me remind you that from 1964 to 1973, during the war in Indochina, the US aviation, and I will give you the specific number after that, over 500,000 or 580,000 military raids were committed in Lao PDR. Over 3 million bombs were dropped, including cluster munition. Over 30% of them, namely 80 million units, still are on the ground, and they are a risk to the life and health of the civilians. Humanitarian demining is necessary for sustainable social and economic development. It is one of the all-national priorities, and an important assistance is provided by Russian experts. Despite all the risks, they demine immediately on the ground, and they share their best practices. Since 2018, Russian sappers cleansed 238.6 hectares of Lao territory. We're talking about the provinces of Bole, Khamsai, Kramon, Vientiane, Hakek, and Huapuan. They demined 4,367 air bombs, mines, and artillery projectiles. Cooperation between Russia and the Lao PDR on humanitarian demining confirms clearly the strategic nature of bilateral relations. They build upon many years of traditions of genuine friendship and mutual support that were established during the Soviet help to the Lao people. And another important date, on the 12th of April, we will celebrate the Cosmonautics Day, and this date was not chosen accidentally. This very day, everybody learned who Yuri Gagarin is, and the whole humankind learned that for the first time ever, a human being was in the outer space and he was safely back again. Besides that, it was established by the UNGA resolution. This is a historical landmark that paved the way to the exploration of the outer space. It is a triumph of the Soviet science. It is a fulfilling of many hundreds years of dreams of the whole humankind that was made real thanks to the selfless work of scientists. Today, we inherited the era of those grand people who were behind the historical achievements and discoveries in the outer space. We're not just cherishing their memory, we try to multiply this heritage, something that was given to us as an invaluable treasure, as Yuri Gagarin put it. In the run up to the 65th anniversary, we can say that the Russian space sector preserved glorious traditions of the past, but multiplied it as well, created new space launch facilities, rockets, and satellite constellations. There is another important thing. Our country did something that was almost impossible, to give a chance and to give a lot of hope to a great deal of countries to participate in the space exploration to many countries through the training of foreign cosmonauts and joint piloting. I believe that it would be wrong to say we shouldn't say that, but we will present the special report on the programs that the Soviet Union started in 1970s, and a number of foreign cosmonauts presented by other countries. They didn't have a chance to develop their space programs, but they got a chance to get into the outer space thanks to the Soviet science and the Soviet state, the government and the people of the Soviet Union, naturally. I would like to say that Russia is still the leader in this area. We continue to actively work to develop national space program. We pay special attention to ensuring safety and sustainability of the space activities. On the 17th of June 2025, the new national project, Outer Space, was adopted. It includes 8 federal projects. 2 of them is the space science and space nuclear energy that seeks to explore the solar system, create conditions and infrastructure. And there is project technological system and personnel, and the other projects are modern, competitive access to the outer space, navigation and time, and many others. Within this project, we plan to launch the first nuclear power plant on the moon. It will be the energy foundation for the future moon lunar bases. An important track of Russian scientific program is the development of Earth remote sensing. The Russian orbital group remote sensing unit includes 20 spacecraft, and building upon the data we get, we implement key environmental projects, we monitor ice melting in the Arctic, we explore ways to prevent threats of wildfires, and these initiatives confirm Russia's commitment to global sustainable development goals endorsed by the UN. In 2025, Russia successfully launched 17 rockets. We launched 45 spacecraft, social and economic, scientific, educational, and commercial tracks. We implement our international commitments on the operation of the International Space Station. We are actively developing the Russian orbital station. It would be the new platform for scientific research and testing space technologies. The multifunctional system for personal satellite communication is operating successfully. globally, and there are private initiatives as well. Currently, Bureau 1440 company is working on the Dawn Group. It comprises 300 space aircraft, and it would ensure the speed of up to 1 gigabyte per second. And at the second stage, it would increase the number of satellites up to 900. And even in the Northern Sea route, a human could get all the necessary data, just like in the center of Moscow. On the 23rd of March, the first batch of 16 satellites were sent into the orbit. By 2031, GLONASS and the Dawn system will increase the accuracy, and shortly we'll develop the geological stations, the Yamal type aircraft, building upon the status of the leading space power. Russia has been successfully bolstering constructive interaction with all the participants of the space activities that are interested, and we believe that the Russian Space Forum that is organized for the first time on the 9th of April as part of the Russian Space Week from the 6th to the 12th of April will give an additional momentum to win-win cooperation in the peaceful exploration of the outer space with all the interested partners. In a nutshell, the outer space is not about the technologies per se that are detached from life. We're talking about our future. Russia wants the outer space to be a space for cooperation, not for war. There should be no behind the closed doors clubs and friend of all principle. This is not our approach. That's not what our predecessors were aspiring for, and that's not why they opened the door for the outer space, so that these clumsy people could pollute the outer space as they did in the Earth. If we make the outer space as another theater of war, as somebody tries to do on Earth, this would not benefit anyone.
If we keep it peaceful, the entire humankind will win. So we will provide a detailed coverage of the events marking Cosmonautics Day and the 65th anniversary of the first space flight. As you know, we will do it on our social media resources, the Foreign Ministry website, and accounts of our foreign missions, official accounts on social media. And one more important announcement. From the 28th till the 30th of April, in Mineralny Vody, the third Caucasus Investment Forum will be held. The event has become a traditional platform for presenting the economic potential of the North Caucasus region, strengthening mutually beneficial ties with our partners, discussing practical issues, and implementing cutting-edge initiatives. It includes more than 50 events of various fields. The focus will be on trade and entrepreneurship, industry, agriculture, transport and logistics, digitalization, and other relevant topics. The cultural program will include a festival dedicated to the traditions of Russia's regions, representatives of Russian and international government agencies, business circles, and scientific and expert community will participate. In 2025, it was attended by over 4,000 participants from 32 countries, including leaders and representatives of government structures, companies, experts, and leading media outlets. Around 206 billion rubles worth agreements were signed, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Is International Live with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. I would like to hear your comment, the comment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation about the election of General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, To Lam, as president of the country. Yes, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam has been elected president of the country. It has been a confirmation of the high professionalism of the Vietnamese leader who on numerous occasions visited our country. Last year he participated in the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the Great Patriotic War victory. We congratulate Comrade To Lam on the election as president of the country. And we hope to maintain partnership for the sake of stability in the Asia-Pacific region and as a whole. Thank you very much. Is Ella Mayadin with us?
Здравствуйте, Мария Владимировна.
Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Our question was
в чем именно заключалось российское
about
египетское посредничество в рамках международных усилий, и в том числе при участии Пакистана.
what exactly was the Russian-Egyptian mediatorship in the Middle East and taking into account Pakistan. So now we have changed our question a little bit because the bombings of Iran continue, the bombings by Israel. Now Israel does not comply with the agreement, as you have already made comments, and Lebanon is a participant in the ceasefire agreement. So how would you comment on that? Let us start with the Russian position and the situation in the region as a whole. Also within the context of the aggression by the United States of America, I would underline once again that the recent events have become a vivid confirmation of the right policy of the Russian Federation formulated by the President of the Russian Federation and implemented by our country. We have from the very beginning named the things as they are, and we underlined that it was unprovoked aggression by the US and Israel against Iran that have caused the crisis, and we have underlined that it will inevitably lead to tragic consequences for the entire world, not only for the region, but for the entire world. Now today, on the basis of the UN documents, we have considered the negative impact, this tragedy that continued before us, before the eyes of the entire world. And it's also in the context of the discussion of the maritime resolution within the UN Security Council, and we have called upon the parties to abstain from hate speech and we have underlined it was just cried out because so many civilians were killed, primarily children. It's difficult actually to find the words, but keeping silent about those facts, that strategical white noise that has been turned on by many Western media, just deliberately ignoring the mass murder of so many people, primarily children, in the Iranian school as a result of the attack from the air. We have supported efforts by Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, and other states aimed at facilitation of the resolution
обстановки в регионе. И мы делали все возможное для того, чтобы эта работа принесла
And dialogue
осязаемые
aimed at
плоды. Я хочу
the
подчеркнуть, что здесь нет не
settlement
то, что
in
они
the
такие
region, and
противоречия. Здесь
this
есть как
has
раз, на мой
yielded
взгляд,
its results.
чрезвычайно важный пример того, как, с одной стороны, можно
It's a very
не
important
погрешить
example.
против истины, давать принципиальные оценки происходящим событиям, но при
We can
этом
adhere to the
и
truth and to give the
вовсю
truthful
применять дипломатию, переговорные возможности,
assessments of the
имеющиеся
situation,
связи
and to
для
use to the full
выхода
extent
из
diplomacy and the
рукотворного
links we have,
кризиса, который был, так сказать,
the ties
создан
in order
агрессией
to
США и Израиля против
overcome
Ирана.
the
И мы
crisis
надеемся
created
на
by the
то, что
aggression of the
начавшийся
US and
процесс
Israel
урегулирования
against Iran, and we
конфликта
hope that
приведет к
the process of
установлению
the settlement of the conflict
прочного
that has
мира в
started will
регионе. Я
lead to
прекрасно понимаю, с какими
a
вызовами,
stable
рисками,
peace in the
с
region.
какими
Yes, I understand very
проблемами
well those
придется
risks
еще
and problems
сталкиваться
we will have to
региону,
face.
но мы исходим из
The
того,
region will
что
have to face
свои усилия
again, but we
продолжим. Я
are
более чем
based on the
уверена,
fact
что этот
that we will
ответ является
continue
ответом
our
на вторую часть
efforts.
вашего вопроса.
Yes, I'm sure that
Спасибо.
this is also a
Спасибо
reply
вам.
to the second part of your
С
question.
нами
Thank
ли
you, thank you.
медиакорпорация Китая?
Is China Media Corporation with us?
Да, добрый день, Мария Владимировна. Мы с вами.
Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We are here. We have two questions today. As we have mentioned today, the situation around Iran is aggravating, oil prices are growing, and the US are softening some restrictions against the Russian oil, and countries just starting to use those relaxations, and is that a sign that the Western system of sanctions against Russia is beginning to crack under the pressure of geopolitical realities? And Japan is also considering purchasing Russian oil. What's Russian position on this issue? I would like to underline once again that in the face of such legitimate restrictions by the West, Russia is still a full-scale participant of the energy market and complies with its commitments in energy security and for the citizens who need energy resources just as consumers. And this fantastically not wise denial of Russian energy resources is Russia has found new centers, focused on new centers of economic growth in the south, in the east, and we hope to increase cooperation with our partners within the EAU, CIS, BRICS, and SCO. Demand for Russian oil and gas is increasing amid the ongoing energy crisis. We have seen many publications. Allegedly, the main beneficiary, according to Western media, of the tragedy unwinding in the Middle East is Russia, because energy prices grew and Russia is earning on that. But just a minute, what is happening with the global market? It has no traces of manipulations by Russia. Russia has just called for long-term, forecastable energy cooperation, not speculative, but not just based on the current situation, but long, stable, and that can be predicted. That will become a basis for global energy security, and those who manipulated, those who used energy for political purposes and for the purposes of political manipulations,
подвести печальный итог
Those were the
подобных
countries
страшных
that cannot
экспериментов.
just
В
present the
отношении
outcome
поступившей
of
информации о
such
возможных закупках
beastly
российской нефти в Японии,
experiments.
знаете, хотелось бы еще раз
Now it's
подчеркнуть, что наша
about the
страна
purchase of
никогда
Russian
не
oil by
закрывала двери
Japan.
для диалога с теми, кто готов его вести на
Our
взаимоуважительной,
country has never
равноправной
closed the doors to
основе.
dialogue
Мы всегда
with
приветствуем
those who are
перспективный
ready
подход
to
других государств к
conduct it on an
взаимодействию, в том
equal
числе
and
и в энергетической сфере.
mutual
Еще
respectful
раз подчеркну,
basis.
мы
It's
открыты
an energy
к
sphere, I would underline
равноправному,
once again, we are ready for equal,
взаимоуважительному партнерству.
mutual respectful partnership.
Но мне кажется, стоит еще напомнить вам тот материал, с которого мы сегодня брифинг начали. Какие приоритеты у японского
And I would like to
правительства на
remind you about the
сегодняшний день?
material we have
Вместо того,
started
чтобы
our briefing
действовать в
today
интересах
with
подданных
the priorities of the Japanese
Японии
government now.
или японских компаний, обеспечивать их надежными энергоресурсами,
Instead of
дать
acting
возможность
supporting the
работать на
interests of
перспективном, более чем перспективном
Japanese
российском
citizens
рынке, дать возможность
and
наслаждаться всеми
companies, to give them the
возможностями,
prospects of
или
energy
всеми
market, to enjoy
действительно
all the
бонусами,
possibilities
которые
of the
предоставляет
bonuses that are provided by
Россия с точки
Russia
зрения своих природных ресурсов, полезных ископаемых, огромные
by
территории,
its natural
так сказать,
resources, the
логистики и так далее.
reserves,
Японское правительство
significant territories,
поддерживает связь с
logistics. The
коммунистическим
Japanese
киевским
government
режимом для
maintains
того, чтобы развивать. Нет,
ties with
не
the Kiev
сотрудничество на
terrorist
пользу своих
regime.
граждан или на пользу своей социальной сфере или там гуманитарном сотрудничестве. Нет, а для того, чтобы
Not
замазывать себя
to
все больше и больше
strengthen
вот этой самой
cooperation for the sake of
коллаборацией
their
с
citizens, but just
террористическим
to
режимом
smear themselves
Банкова.
with this collaboration with the terrorist regime at Bankova.
Если у вас еще вопрос?
Do you have
Да,
any
спасибо.
other
Второй вопрос.
questions?
Согласно
Yes,
последним данным
thank you.
Open Router, это глобальная
My
платформа
second
для работы с
question,
API крупных
according
языковых моделей.
to
На прошлой неделе
the
мировой
latest
объем обращений
data
к таким моделям достиг
by
27 триллионов
Open
долларов,
Router,
увеличившись почти на
a platform
20%.
working with
При этом
API
совокупный объем
of
обращений китайским
language
языковым
models.
моделям вырос
The global volume of
до
addresses
13,5
reached
триллионов токенов.
27
Как вы
trillion
оцениваете такие результаты
tokens,
Китая в области
and
искусственного
the
интеллекта?
volume of
Открывают ли они новые возможности для расширения
addresses in
сотрудничества
the
между Россией и
Chinese
Китаем в этой
language
сфере?
Знаете, я хочу начать с
grew
того, что
by
традиционно Россия и Китай придерживаются близких
31.8%
подходов к информационно-коммуникационным
compared to the
технологиям,
previous
включая,
week.
конечно, и искусственный
How do
интеллект.
you assess China's
Разделяем
achievements
убежденность
in
о
artificial
недопустимости попыток
intelligence?
отдельных стран установить
We think that
неоколониальную, теперь
China has
уже
achieved a
цифровую
leading
зависимость,
position
навязать
globally in this
свои
sphere,
ценности, а лучше сказать
and
антиценности,
many
или
countries just
привить
trying to
чуждые
impose their
стандарты в области
values,
искусственного интеллекта другим, без спроса или вопреки
to
пожеланиям,
impose
ограничить
values
других
in
разработкой
artificial
собственных
intelligence
технологий. Нет,
alien
этот
to some
метод не
countries.
наш.
Yes, it's
Мы
not
выступаем
our
за развитие
method.
равноправного и взаимовыгодного
We
сотрудничества
stand
в
for the
этой сфере,
development of
которое было
equal
бы направлено
and
на
mutually
укрепление цифрового
beneficial cooperation in
суверенитета.
this sphere aimed
И,
at
конечно, значительные достижения Китая,
strengthening
который
digital
вышел на лидирующие
sovereignty
позиции в
and
мире по целому
the
ряду направлений цифрового развития, формируют благоприятную основу
achievements
для
of
выстраивания
China that
системного
has
и
reached
долгосрочного взаимодействия между
a
нашими
lot in
странами
this
в
sphere,
области
and
цифровых технологий, включая технологии искусственного интеллекта. Успешное
we
применение на
stand for
практике
further
передовых
cooperation
технологических решений
beneficial for
позволяет не
both
только
our countries in
обмениваться
artificial
опытом, но и
intelligence.
совместно вырабатывать новые подходы к цифровой
It would allow not only
трансформации,
to exchange experience, but to
адаптироваться к
work to
современным
develop new
вызовам.
approaches to digital
И вот, кстати,
transformation,
в
to adapt to
координации с
modern
Пекином
challenges.
Россия последовательно отстаивает на международных
By the
площадках
way, in
общие
coordination with
взгляды о
Beijing,
необходимости
Russia is
создания
consistently
доверенных решений в
defending
области искусственного интеллекта, уважения
our
к искусственному
shared values
суверенитету,
at
центральной роли
international
Организации
forums,
Объединенных Наций в организации
respect
и
for state
интеграции
sovereignty,
профильных
the
дискуссий, ответственности
central role of
разработчиков
the
и праве
UN,
государства осуществлять контроль за потоками данных
the
в
responsibility of
пределах своей
developers and the
юрисдикции.
right of states to
И
control
закреплению
data
этих
flows within their
положений может
jurisdiction.
послужить учреждение Всемирной организации по сотрудничеству в области искусственного интеллекта, готовности
And
совместной
the
работе
Global
над запуском
Organization for
которой
Artificial Intelligence
договорились главы
Cooperation, its
правительств
launch could
России
contribute
и Китая
to
по
those
итогам 30-й
purposes.
регулярной
It has been
встречи в
agreed
Ханчжоу.
according
Она состоялась
to
3
the 30th regular
ноября
meeting
прошлого
by
25 года.
Russian and
Также
Chinese
намерены
representatives in
тесно
Hangzhou.
координироваться и в рамках
The
недавно
meeting was
созданной в
held on the
Организации
3rd
Объединенных
of
Наций
November
специализированной
2025.
структуры глобального диалога по управлению искусственным
Also, we
интеллектом.
will adhere to the
Первое
specialized UN
заседание
body, the Global
состоится,
Dialogue on
запланировано на
Artificial
6-7
Intelligence.
июля
Its
в
first
Женеве.
meeting is planned
Ну и,
for the
конечно,
6th,
приверженность нашей
7th
страны
July in
развитию
Geneva.
сотрудничества в сфере искусственного интеллекта закрепляется и в международных договоренностях Например, в прошлом году в
And
ШОС
our
и в Риге
country's
были приняты
commitment to
профильные документы. Например, Тиндийская декларация Совета глав
cooperation
государств-членов
in
Шанхайской
artificial
организации
intelligence
сотрудничества, это 1
development.
сентября 2025 года, и
It's
заявление лидеров
enshrined, and
БРИКС по глобальному управлению в области искусственного интеллекта
there
7
have been
июля
documents within
прошлого года.
BRICS and the SCO,
Ну, на наш взгляд, именно такое
Tianjin Declaration,
сотрудничество
and the
открывает
BRICS
возможности для
leaders'
реализации
statements of
совместных
the 7th
проектов
of July
развития
2025.
инновационных продуктов, внедрения передовых технологий в ключевых отраслях.
Such cooperation
Дальнейший
opens
приоритет
up
развития
opportunities
уже
for
обозначен.
further
В
implementation
повестку
of joint
предстоящих
projects, the
переговоров
development
лидеров
of
наших стран
innovative
ключевые
products, and
вопросы развития
the
взаимодействия в таких сферах,
agenda
как
includes
цифровая экономика,
interaction in the
искусственный интеллект,
digital economy, artificial
трансграничная
intelligence, transborder
коммерция и так
commerce.
далее. Ну вот, если
And
отвечать кратко на ваш
let's
вопрос.
brief
И вы знаете,
response
кстати,
to your
вот
question.
на днях мне сообщили, буквально вчера,
And you know,
наши
recently I
эксперты,
have been
что
informed
тот
just
учебник,
yesterday, our
который был
experts
выпущен на
said
базе
that
дипломатической
the school book
академии,
issued on the basis of the Diplomatic Academy
вызвал, это было уже
has
второе
caused, it
переиздание
was
учебника,
the secondary edition
посвященное
of the school book
искусственного
dedicated to the
интеллекта и
issues of
международной
artificial
безопасности.
intelligence and
Так вот, он
international
привлек
security. It
внимание
attracted the
и экспертов
attention
Шанхайской организации сотрудничества, и,
of
насколько я понимаю,
the
сейчас
SCO
обсуждается даже
experts
возможность
as well,
его
and
перевода на
now
китайский язык.
we
Ну, тоже
discuss
вот
the
в качестве
possibility of its
такого практического
translation
шага
into
взаимодействия на
Chinese.
международных площадках.
So it's a practical step of interaction on
Спасибо
international
большое.
platforms.
Спасибо
Thank you very
вам.
much.
С нами Ли
Thank
Синьхуа.
you. Is Xinhua with us?
Здравствуйте, Мария Владимировна.
Hello, Madam Zakharova.
Корреспондент агентства Синхуа.
Xinhua correspondent
Председатель
here.
партии Коминдан Чжэн Йивэн находится с визитом в материковой части Китая. Это было первый раз за 10 лет, когда
Kuomintang
председатель
party
партии
chairman
Коминдан
is
во главе
visiting mainland
делегации
China. It's the
посещает
first
материковую
time
часть страны.
that the
Как вы бы
Kuomintang party
прокомментировали этот
delegation
визит?
is visiting the
И
mainland of
учитывая
China.
нынешнюю сложную
How would you
международную
comment on this
ситуацию,
visit,
как
taking
Россия
into account
оценивает
the
позицию
current
и
international
усилия Китая по
situation?
урегулированию тайванского вопроса? Спасибо.
How does Russia
Вы знаете,
assess
хочу
China's
начать
positions
с
and efforts to resolve the
нашего
Taiwan
традиционного
issue?
подхода и
I
подчеркнуть
would like to
еще
start
раз,
with
как я
our
думаю, вы
traditional
знаете,
approach and to underline once
что
again that, as you know, situation
так сказать, в любом контексте обсуждаемая так называемая тайваньская
in
тема,
any
это
context
внутреннее дело
discussed,
Китая. Я думаю,
the
что здесь
Taiwanese
наши
issue is
позиции
a
хорошо
domestic issue of
знакомы.
China.
Мы
I think
считаем,
you are
что
perfectly aware
конструктивные контакты
of our
между
position,
берегами Тайваньского пролива способствуют стабильности и безопасности
and the
в данном
context
субрегионе. А четкая и
on the
последовательная
Taiwan
принципиальная
issue,
позиция нашей страны по вопросу Тайваня, еще раз хочу подчеркнуть,
just
она остается
in
неизменной,
accordance with
она
the
отражена во
resolution
многих
of the
политических,
issues in the region, and
двусторонних
it's the
документах, в
position
том
reflected in
числе
many bilateral
определяющих для
documents,
межгосударственных отношений договоре между
also
Российской
the major
Федерацией и Китайской
documents
Народной
for
Республикой
interstate
о
relations, including the
добрососедстве,
treaty
дружбе
between the
и
Russian Federation and the
сотрудничестве,
People's Republic of
заключен
China on good
16
neighborliness,
июля
friendship, and cooperation
2001
of
года,
the 16th
соответственно,
of
в этом году
July
отмечаем его
2001.
25-летие.
So it's the 25th
Вновь
anniversary of this
подчеркну,
treaty
что
this year.
выбор путей урегулирования
Let me
ситуации в
emphasize
Тайваньском
that
проливе
when it
является
comes to the
исключительно
ways to
внутренним делом
settle the situation
Китая,
in
при
the
этом
Taiwan
отмечаем,
Strait,
что Пекин
it is purely the
последовательно
domestic
заявляет
affair
о
of China.
приоритетности
At the
мирного
same time,
объединения,
we
что
note
мы,
that
разумеется,
Beijing
приветствуем
consistently
и
claims
искренне
that
надеемся,
the
что вопрос
peaceful
будет
unification
разрешен без
is
ущерба
its
для мира и
priority,
стабильности в
and we
регионе.
welcome that. We sincerely hope
Спасибо вам
that
большое.
the issue will be
Спасибо
resolved
вам.
without
С нами
detriment to the
ли
peace and
Белта?
stability in the region. Thank you. Thank you. Belta, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. I have the following question. Recently, YouTube deleted the channels of key news outlets Belta, ONT, and STV TV channels. Belta had almost 2.5 million subscribers all around the world, and these actions were condemned by a number of journalist organizations, including the Russian Journalist Association, as well as the executive secretary of the CIS Lebedev, Kondrashov, TASS agency, a number of public activists, although international watchdogs are keeping mum. What is your take on that? For starters, I would like to say that what the video hosting that you've mentioned did with regard to Belarus news outlets, it actually made one movement to destroy the news media, news outlet that was comfortable for millions. And this could be called an outrageous sabotage and act of political censorship. You can name other in other ways. This is the barbaric actions of the 21st century, yet use various pretexts. They cite illegitimate sanctions and fighting fake content. Maybe they should start with themselves. On a daily basis, they have content published by Western officials, and they completely change tone every day, and they do not make any changes to that. But most interesting thing is the community rules. What kind of community are we talking about? Where are these rules listed? Nobody knows that. But we're talking about this just like about the notorious world order or rules-based order. This once again shows that this serves the interests of the West, and they were never interested in the truth, in the pluralism of opinion, in diversity of opinion, the freedom of speech. These are all the foundation of democracy. They were against the pillars of democracy. At the same time, they allegedly supported democracy, claiming that that is their ultimate value. Turns out that they need a sterile and completely loyal broadcasting that is loyal to them and to their values. What is under control can exist. What is at odds with them, or even not controlled by them completely, this should be destroyed. Well, we are well aware of this situation. We have seen this repeatedly. They started blocking Russian media outlets, Russian journalists and activists, and the video hosting that you've mentioned resorted to the outright censorship, closing down foreign ministry, social networks, and we got repeated warnings, so to speak, and it was not clear why dozens of video reports and video clips were banned, including address by Foreign Minister Lavrov and our briefings. It is surprising that they are living in their world that they created. Western journalists ask questions to the Foreign Minister of Russia. He answers these questions, and the American video hosting tries to block all that. This is absurd. You've mentioned that there is no response, no feedback. That became a norm to them. International human rights watchdogs are keeping silent. Sectoral international commissions are keeping silence. Does it surprise you? It does not surprise us. You shouldn't be surprised. You should fight against that actively. There was no response back then, and there would not be any response today. It's not that this response would change the practice of global corporations, but it would record the facts of violations by these companies, and they are not entitled to designate who should have their say and who should not. It is regretful that we made warnings long time ago and they come true. The appetite is growing, and they continue to silence undesired voices, spreading it to new countries and regions, and they spread it to themselves as well. They cannot contain and deter this information monster that tries to devour their own content makers. They put some labels, they make some whitelists and blacklists and so on. Therefore, we're talking always about the importance of digital sovereignty, the need to build our own digital infrastructure. I'm not just naming facts. And it is not just an occasion to feel sad and to regret it. We invite our Belarus friends to build up your media presence on Russian platforms. You can come there, you can register on Russian platforms, and at the same time we have something common, the common media outlet. Thank you. Reuters, are you here with us? Madam Zakharova, hello. We have a question to you. It has to do with Ukraine. We have already asked you about that some time ago. Recently, the Ukrainian intelligence claimed that after the beginning of a war by the US and Israel against Iran, Russia provides the list of facilities and infrastructure to Iran for further strikes, and that Russian and Iranian hackers join hands in cyberspace. And I would kindly ask you to comment on these statements. I have a question from the viewpoint of this, so to speak, Ukrainian intelligence. Haven't Iranian hackers joined hands with Russian hackers to meddle in the US election? They joined hands just recently, right? Well, listen. You suggest I take at face value what the Ukrainian intelligence say, but you want to double check it. Let me say that claims on some kind of joint efforts of Russian and Iranian hackers, as you put it, is another lie of the Kiev regime, of the Kiev terrorist groups. And it is ironical that these statements are made by the very group that at the level of security services and using controlled cyber groups and holds a large-scale notorious nefarious campaign against Russia. I'm not talking about information space. I'm talking about cyberspace. They use abuse of Russian citizens. They hack Russian email. They download personal data of Russians. They even attack servers of public bodies, agencies. They block them, and they do other things. So they are the ones who talk about some shenanigans, manipulations, and hackers. They do a lot of criminal things in cyberspace, and they do it openly. They are proud about attempted digital sabotage, and now we understand that it started long before that, and we're not talking about Russian fraudsters that before 2022 claimed to be officials in the bank. But these were the people in call centers organized and controlled by Ukrainian security services. These were Ukrainian citizens as well. And as we see it right now, these call centers are located in the Ukrainian territory. Some of them are identified in other regions on other continents, including in Southeast Asia. People are forced to be there. They are abducted virtually, and they are forced to work there, not as hackers, but as cyber criminals. People are being liberated right now, and we tell you about these examples as well. I would like to emphasize that when it comes to the targets of Ukrainian hackers or even digital criminals, the targets are civilian objects, so we see clear violation of the responsible rules of conduct that was agreed upon within the UN. We can say it right now because we're not talking about some private groups, private criminal groups. This was something organized under the aegis of the Ukrainian, so to speak, state, the Kiev regime. These are specialized units in charge of cybercrime. They recruit rank-and-file citizens. They recruit also capabilities. They use mistakes, routine mistakes. They use new technological advances, but this is all made under the auspices of the Kiev regime. We believe that long-term threat to the international information security is posed by the Kiev regime and those Western countries that sponsor it at the behest of its authorities and Western sponsors. The country, Ukraine that is, has turned into a safe haven for hundreds of cyber criminals and online scammers, and they work not only against Russia but also against other countries. There were special operations within the European Union states to expose and to arrest, to bring charges against digital criminals in Ukraine. That's the way to answer your question. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ria Novosti, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello, Christina Rodriguez. Ria Novosti. We have one question, but a big one. I would kindly ask you, Madam Zakharova, to comment on the information that we got this morning from the Russian intelligence service that the EU wants to create its own nuclear weapons. I believe that this information has value in itself and it should have a follow-up from the legal standpoint. Certainly, when it comes to messages, especially the ones that are based on facts and not just assessments from the Russian intelligence service, should be treated exceptionally seriously. The recent developments are regretful. We see growing interest to the nuclear weapons by European capitals that up until recently stood for swift nuclear disarmament. With each passing day, we see new statements by anonymous or not anonymous European politicians that muse about how good it would be to get this type of weapons, or at least to have another nuclear umbrella to equip themselves, and they need to do that allegedly for safety reasons. They hid before that. They were hiding before the solidarity, under the solidarity umbrella, but after the Strait of Hormuz had changed, we know that virtually a month ago it was raised by Emmanuel Macron, besides the intention of Paris to start non-transparent building of its nuclear deterrent stockpile. He also announced some kind of advanced or enforced algorithms of nuclear deterrence carried out by France, and European non-nuclear countries are to be involved in it, allegedly. Actually, it takes my breath away to witness how they are fighting economy-wise, policy-wise. Well, they present it as some kind of a solidarity, but it is interesting to know when these non-nuclear states get nuclear weapons, how will it all happen, and what it will result into, that is an open question. All at once, Europe sees a row of those who wish to join such schemes. In many ways, this copies the American approaches to these expanded nuclear deterrence. It is interesting that the Americans deployed their nuclear arsenals in Western Europe, and at the same time playing with it, managing it, or having any access whatsoever. It was not given to these countries. That means that the countries of the EU have these nuclear weapons, but what happens with that? What is the state of these weapons, let alone the fact that these countries could decide its fate? This question has never even been discussed, and the EU countries never received any report from Washington on what is happening with the nuclear weapons in their country. In terms of the industrial and technological framework, naturally there are a lot of countries in Europe with a developed nuclear fuel cycle. The IAEA should have a closer look on them. Overall, such pro-nuclear movement clearly erodes and weakens the global non-proliferation regime. And there are statements that are made on NPT commitments by European countries. At the same time, they're not against getting nuclear weapons, and these statements are not credible. They say, first, we need to get nuclear weapons, and what will happen next, and how it will be regulated in the international legal framework. Nobody is talking about that. Nobody follows the following logic. First, you need to take a look at the legal framework and how it can be introduced in the international commitment so that it would be not at odds with anything. Nobody is having this kind of a conversation. Nobody is pursuing this policy. All these matters naturally should be carefully considered within the NPT review conference that is opening on the 27th of April. We believe that one of the key tasks to strengthen the NPT regime is to curb the destructive aspiration by Europeans and to put an end to this frenzy in Europe and people that dream about nuclear weapons. Thank you. Lenta.ru, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. We have 3 questions today. The first one is as follows. Recently, President Trump provided weapons to Iranian mass rallies, and what's the take on this? Does it mean that they want to organize a coup in Iran?
So even out of the context of the current tragic war, we adhere to the provisions of the UN, non-interference in domestic affairs of states. It's our basic approach, but talking about the situation unwinding in the region now, Washington is not its first call for violent destabilization in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the collapse of the country's statehood. What is the outcome of such interference in the internal affairs of other states? Namely, regime change or dismantling authorities. Just remember Libya, Syria, and Iraq. In recent years, we have witnessed a significant number of externally inspired color revolutions leading to the collapse of statehood, civil wars, and conflicts and devastating humanitarian crises.
простые люди, граждане
Every
этих стран,
time
чья жизнь, свобода,
the
от которой
primary
так требуется
victims
на
were
Западе,
ordinary
благосостояние,
people
благополучие, да и
whose
вообще
lives,
будущее
freedom, and
становились
well-being
разменной монетой в геополитических
Western countries
игрищах
seem to be
стран
so
Запада.
concerned about it, but
Еще
they
раз
have
повторю,
become
позиция
bargaining
Российской
chips
Федерации
in
остается
the geopolitical
неизменной.
games
Мы
of Western
категорически
countries.
осуждаем подобные агрессивные
I would
призывы
repeat, our
и
position
подобные
remains the
агрессивные
same. We
действия как
categorically
абсолютно
condemn
недопустимые,
such
тем
calls as
более, если они
such
рассчитаны на
aggressive
оправдание
actions. They
внешней
are
военной
not
агрессии и
acceptable,
интервенции.
especially if they are intended to justify external military aggression and intervention. Thank you. My next question. On the 6th of April, Russian President Alexander Lukashenko, at a meeting with CSTO Secretary General Teatlabek Mesadikov, called for very careful and cautious approach to Armenia due to the upcoming parliamentary elections. How does Moscow assess the impact of the upcoming elections on ongoing interaction with Yerevan within the organization? The issue of Russian-Armenian relations has been discussed in details during the latest meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Armenian President Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. His walking visit to Moscow on the 1st of April. In the context of the upcoming elections in Armenia, Russia's principal position has been emphasized. We do not interfere into the domestic political affairs of other states. Regarding Armenia, for decades, we are united by diverse ties, history, and civilizational dimension. A 2 million Armenian diaspora resides in Russia. For them, it's part of their historical nature. The ties that cannot just be severed, cannot be abandoned. It would be just too painful. But we cannot ignore the processes in the Republic and hope that pro-Russian forces will be able to freely participate in the expression of the will of Armenian citizens. We're just not discussing interference in domestic affairs now. It's not that. But all the Armenian citizens have the right to vote. But they support ties with Russia based on objective factors. It would be democratic and free expression of will, as it should be done in democratic countries. So it's just in a totally hasty manner adopted amendments to the election code of the Republic of Armenia, and the new measures will envisage serious restrictions in the names of the political forces participating in elections. It's very important for that not to purposefully restrict the electoral opportunities of the opposition. So maybe those who have stood for developing such measures, they will explain the purpose of that, but we just remember very recently Nikol Pashinyan. It's a quotation. It's a quotation by Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister of Armenia. Armenia, he has said, is a democratic country. You have mentioned the CSTO as well. Yes, it was mostly in the CSTO context. Yes, so many speculations here and so many assessments in Armenia itself by Armenian political figures and political forces. it somehow looks not very clean. There is a legally formulated agreement, just you name it, some understanding, solution, that obviously demonstrates the membership of Yerevan, the full-fledged CSTO membership with its obligations and its rights. Some other solution has not been adopted by anyone, despite some verbal speculations, some offenses, false publications, and so on. We are interested in their full-fledged participation in our common structure in security. Thank you. And my final question. Moldova's President, National Security Advisor Stanislav Secreiro stated Chisinau's willingness to share experience with the European Union in combating alleged Russian interference in elections. How does Moscow assess this statement by the Moldovan official? You know, there are no other types of manifestations by officials and the regime. They just exchange lies, fantasies with the EU. Maybe if they had something else like products, financial achievements, technologies, they would have exchanged that, but either the European Union not spreading its arms for that, or there are some other reasons. That's what they exchange. But seriously, we view this statement as yet another manifestation of official Chisinau's anti-Russian policy. Unfounded accusations of Russia's non-existent interference in Moldova's electoral processes has become one of the methods of its implementation. Moldovan officials cannot provide any evidence of Russia's involvement. They have not provided anything before. They do not provide anything now. Why? It's not because they do not want. They have no proof. They have no words. They have just fake words. Fake accusations. I would remind you, during presidential elections in Moldova, independent media drew attention to some other situation, massive violations of voter rights by the Moldovan authorities themselves. The European sponsors assisted the Moldovan authorities in that, helped to violate their own Moldovan laws. Chisinau was actively visited by European politicians and officials not to monitor the observance of norms during the elections, but to campaign for specific political forces. They promised to continue financial support to certain politicians, to certain social groups, in case of election, in case of winning of the specific political figures pointed out by themselves. It was just buying, it was financial blackmail, and it was implemented with regard to Moldovan voters by the Sandu regime group and its Western patrons as sponsors. Experts and political scientists mentioned the lack of transparency in voting, like mail voting in Western Europe and North America. Mass transportation of voters to polling stations located there. You just remember manipulations with bulletins and election polling stations on the territory of Russia. Russia was ready to open polling stations at the request of Moldovan authorities, but the Moldovan authorities did their best to open a minimum number of polling stations on the territory of Russia, although There were a lot of Moldovan citizens who were willing to vote. So there is no doubt what experience Chisinau and Brussels intend to share. Fakes and lies. So, thank you. Israel with us. Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. I have two questions. First of all, could you comment on the statement by the Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry, which demanded that the Russian side not mention Nagorno-Karabakh? And despite the fact that Azerbaijan actively comments on the issue of Russia's sovereignty over the new entities, considering them part of Ukrainian territory. So the response to those statements will be conveyed to the Azerbaijani side, and starting from the 90s, we have facilitated in resolving issues between Baku and Yerevan. Russia's peacekeeper contingent has ensured ceasefire in the region and launched the stage of Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization in all spheres, and the summit agreements reached in 2020 and 2022. I will post links to those documents in the text version of today's briefing. In a joint statement adopted under the auspices of the EU in Prague on the 6th of October 2022. It was about Armenia and Azerbaijan's recognition of each other's territorial integrity. In recent years, Baku and Yerevan have opted for direct dialogue without mediators. We have supported this decision and understood it, and supported constructive steps aimed at achieving sustainable peace and stability in the South Caucasus. We welcome the initiation of the establishment of peace and interstate relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the agreement of the reached in August 2025. Yes, many things remain in Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization, and to make it irreversible, including peace treaty, restoring transport and economic ties in the region, delimitation and demarcation, strengthening mutual trust between the two peoples. We will provide assistance to Baku and Yerevan on all those tracks. And that's the case when we would like to hope that irreversible will have positive connotation. Yes, thank you. One more question. Could you comment on Alen Semanyan's words, the Speaker of the Armenian Parliament? Oh, hello again. Why are you doing that with Mr. Simanan? Could you please tell me? You have some personal negative relation to him? No, just my question. Taking into account the visit by Mr. Overchuk, so about Armenia withdrawing from the CSTO and the Eurasian Economic Union, if Russia decides to raise prices of its gas supplied to Armenia. So it reminds a little bit that story, threats to hedgehog by showing its opportunities. I do not want to comment seriously on the statements by emotional politicians that have done so many dubious statements. On the issue of the CSTO, we have heard many things. I would remind you We hope it's not blocked in Armenia. When it was told that it's not Armenia that's withdrawing from the CSTO, but the CSTO withdrawing from Armenia, has this process dominated, or is it still underway? Why go back to that and provide some assessments to those emotional statements? It's Armenian citizens who should comment on that primarily, because it's the leaders of Armenia, those building the future of the country. So the citizens of that country, they should be asked what are the assessments of those statements. But I would like to say seriously, the issue of gas supplies to the Republic, it was discussed during the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Nikol Pashinyan on the 1st of April in Moscow. Specific numbers were cited, and I would remind them. Armenia receives Russian gas for $177.50, while in Europe the price reaches $600. This example, it's not an emotion, it's a fact. There are no speculations here, there are numbers. Numbers confirmed by objective data, and the Armenian leadership thinking about the security safety of its country. It's one of the primary tasks of any state, especially this fire situation in gas markets and the Middle East situation. The European politicians are just thinking how not to fall victim to that instability and that turbulence on energy markets because of the unprovoked, baseless aggression of the US and Israel against Iran. Now about the EAU, I think you have mentioned that in your question. I would like to remind you the objective data. Armenia's accession to the EAU in 2015 is recognized by Armenian economists, serves as the foundation of the Republic's well-being. Now I will cite an example that is not emotional, it is specific. Armenia's GDP has nearly tripled over the past 10 years, from $10.5 billion to $29.2 billion. And let us finalize the answer to your question by the CSTO issue. We have commented on this topic on numerous occasions. Yes, the CSTO is connected with ensuring the security of Armenia as well as other members of this organization. Now the Republic's membership in the CSTO is frozen, but this choice has been made by the current Armenian authorities. Thank you. Thank you.
С нами ли Arti Balkan?
Arti Balkans, are you here with us? Hello, good day, Madam Zakharova. As you know already, explosives are found in Serbia near the gas pipeline. We're interested in interaction between the relevant authorities of Serbia and Russia on exchanging information regarding the perpetrators, those who organized this sabotage, and are there traces that Ukraine might be involved, especially given the attacks on Turk Stream and Blue Stream that were repeatedly carried out, and what conclusions should be drawn by Serbia, and how should it respond given the recent prolonging of the gas supply contract with Russia? You know, as of now, as we understand, the relevant bodies of Serbia are investigating this incident. So when it comes to the conclusions, we will make them publicly once the relevant results are published, and certainly we keep track of the actions carried out by the competent authorities of Serbia. But I would like to emphasize that repeatedly during briefings, we noted that deliberate attacks against energy infrastructure became the hallmark of the Kiev regime, and therefore I believe that many politicians in Serbia, as well as activists, journalists, political scientists, experts, and rank-and-file grassroots Serbians, citizens of their country, started asking themselves whether the relevant conclusion shall be made right now. Who needs that and who perpetrated that? Once again, we always assume that an investigation is needed, building upon facts. But indeed, what do they say in the West? You did it because you could do that and because you did it in the past. Judging by this logic presented by the Western countries, everything hints on who did it. Once again, it's not our approach. But this meets the narratives used in various situations when our country was accused. Take a look at this. Only throughout the truth proposed by Trump in 2026, 226 airstrikes were made by Ukraine against energy infrastructure during this truce. And there were systematic attacks against the Druzhba, a friendship pipeline, and this was detrimental not only to our country. So we cannot say that this is part of the hostilities. These are strikes that were deliberate in order to do damage, including to Hungary and to Slovakia. In 2025 alone, pumping stations were damaged, namely Novosibirsk, Nikolskoye, and the hub was damaged and was attacked at least 3 times by the Kiev regime. Let me remind you that from the legal standpoint, these actions are described purely as terrorism. Certainly, the Bankova Street would not allow themselves to make these strikes without the support of Western mentors. And it could happen once, and in this case, we could have said that the Western sponsors failed to put an end to this, but since we're talking about multiple strikes, and I provided specific examples, that means that they didn't say no to that, and against this context, when it comes to the pioneers in the terrorist actions, we can claim that former US President Biden was behind that. He directly promised to put an end to the Nord Stream, and his senior officials, namely Under Secretary of State Nuland, delved on that, and she said that it will be definitely done. She had some follow-up questions to the White House, how it will be done, and do you remember what they said? We'll find a way. And in 6 months' time, the Nord Stream was undermined. There was an explosion on that. Getting back to your question, we will wait for the investigation to be finalized and all the actions carried out by the security services and the law enforcement of Serbia will build upon facts naturally. But once again, I get back to the narrative that was used against our country by the collective West. When we were accused, they said, you did it not because we need some evidence, but because you did it in the past, as they claim it, and you have such an opportunity. I provided specific facts to you, unlike them who didn't provide specific facts. Do you have any other questions? No? If that is the case, moving on, Sputnik Are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. I have one question today. Getting back to Iran, the US administration regularly either demands that Iran should open the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz or threatens that the Iranian civilization will end or concludes a truce that is violated by Israel. Why is this position by Washington so inconsistent when it comes to Iran? Well, we're talking about this miraculous democracy, Western style. It's not about organizing a society. It's not about expression of public will. It's not about providing mandate and delegating the mandate to the representatives, but it is the kind of approach that you've mentioned, and that's what they call our democracy or American democracy. That is the American democracy, their democracy that they cherish so much. They say we need to defend the American democracy, and that's how they do it. You know, we'll not comment right now something that we made assessments to on hot heels immediately. Let us hope that this will be the new stage of negotiations, political and diplomatic solution that would lead to long-term positive outcome. We have been repeatedly assuming that there is no alternative to the diplomatic settlement, and that's what will be the focus for us later on. Let me highlight that over the past 6 weeks we have had a consistent policy, and judging by the developments of tonight, it confirmed to be correct. Let us hope that the developments of today will lead to long-term peace in the region that would be credible and long-term. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on. Izvestia, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. You have partially answered our question regarding the flagrant situation regarding the explosions at the Turk Stream. A follow-up question. Do you think that these actions could affect future relations between Russia and European partners in the energy sector? Is there a risk that such actions could escalate in other regions where there is Russian energy infrastructure? Could it happen in the future? I would start with the second part of your question, because when it comes to the first part, I have nothing to add. Our relations with the European Union were severed, were undermined. I'm not talking about official relations, but I'm talking about the gamut of relations. They were damaged by the EU countries, and our crucial position has not changed. We were not the ones who started the smear campaign. This was not our choice to abandon really good results that we have managed to achieve throughout a span of time. We are responding, we're defending our national interests, defending vital positions, given something that was unleashed against our country, namely an outright hybrid war with the participation of the EU as an institution and its member states. What can I add to that? If they change their position, their behavior, we will look at how we can change our response. There's nothing to comment so far. Your second question pertained to the fact whether this destabilization could be spread, whether attacks could be made, or whether terrorist attacks could be committed against Russian energy civil infrastructure, I have a clarification. Why are you only talking about Russian infrastructure? Take a look at that. The Kiev regime is striking everything that is of interest to it, judging and guided by its own goals and guided by the orders given from Western sponsors. If they want to destabilize the situation in the Balkans, they will do this in that way. If they have to threaten bilateral ties between Russia and other countries in the energy sector, they will start attacking this energy infrastructure as well. But why do you confine this question only to our country? You see and you know from the history that once a group, a state, a political group opts for terrorism, the black hole starts and everything is being plunged into this black hole. It has no control, it has no limits. There is no logic to that, only one logic. This outright terrorist impunity. How can you affect that? You need to carry out some anti-terrorism measures. You should repel it from the political standpoint, but when it comes to the EU, nobody repels the Kiev regime in the EU except for separate members. Some places it's bet on the Kiev regime as a tool that was used by the American ultra-liberals. Many in the European capitals expect them to be their new handlers. Some of them are scared. Somebody else does not have such capabilities because they lost their sovereignty, although we're talking about the European democracy. But most importantly, once again, it is not Ukraine as a state. It is about the Kiev regime as a terrorist neo-Nazi grouping that carries out its terrorist activities not within some kind of a law or going outside the law, but it is doing it, and it is a pure terrorism, classic international terrorist outcasts. I can cite other facts if you want. We talked a lot about, and during this briefing and every time we talk about repeated attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces on Russian energy facilities. For instance, the Druzhba pipeline on the 27th of January, the Kiev regime stopped Russian supplies via this pipeline to Slovakia and Hungary, citing that there are some damages done. Orban commented on that on the 17th of March. Viktor Orban said, the situation is clear, there is oil, there is money, this pipeline was damaged 22 times and it was repaired, and several weeks before our presidential election, on the 23rd time, for some reason it is not repaired. We do not believe these fairy tales. End of quote. In the first week of April, the Bandera regime had another attack using 3 drones on the pumping station Ruska. This is the starting point of Turk's Stream pipeline. It took place on the 2nd of April and it was repelled by the MOD systems and the operation was not destroyed. On the 6th of April, the Kiev regime carried out a large-scale attack using drones against Caspian Pipeline Consortium in the port of Novorossiysk. Civil infrastructure was severely damaged. Dozens of residential houses were damaged. According to latest data, civilians were also affected, and our crucial position on this matter has not changed. It's not that we condemn, but we do not tolerate the attacks on civil infrastructure they do damage to the stability of energy supplies as well as to the welfare of many states. They have a negative impact on regional and global energy security. Given the ongoing energy crisis, such attacks only deteriorate the growing problems, including the ones in Europe. If you have no further questions, let's move on. Bold News.
Да, здравствуйте, Мария
Hello,
Владимировна.
Madam Zakharova.
Приближается памятная дата, 9
A
апреля
landmark
1945
date
года
is
войска маршала
coming
Василевского
close
взяли
on the
штурмом
9th of
город-крепость
April.
Кёнигсберг, столица Восточной
Russian
Пруссии.
troops
Ныне
seized
это российский Калининград на
Königsberg,
западе, в
which
том числе
is
внутри
currently
Польши, часто обсуждают
Kaliningrad.
этот регион как
Many
потенциальную
people in
угрозу.
Lithuania
Даже
and
предлагалось его
Poland claim that
переименовать
this
и
is a
заблокировать.
potential threat. They even
Видит ли Россия в
wanted
этом
to
реальную
rename
угрозу,
it
или же
and
это
to block it.
воспринимается
Is it
как
a
простой
real threat for
раздражитель?
Russia,
И есть ли в
or
случае
is it a
чего у России
simple
план действий?
irritant? And do you have an action plan? We have to state that lately the situation in the Baltic region is seeing a high level of tension, according to diplomats and political scientists. Let's take a look at the situation on the ground. Close to the Russian borders, around the Kaliningrad region, there is an ongoing military NATO buildup. What does it mean? Troops are building up, are being deployed. More large-scale offensive military exercises are carried out, and the target is our country. And against this current geopolitical landscape, our exclave indeed faces a number of serious challenges. Under some far-fetched pretext, the EU and Baltic states, especially Lithuania, tries to stand in the way of the well-being of the region and impede transport and cargo transit, and this is at odds with the arrangements, including partnership and cooperation agreement of 1994 between Russia and the EU, and an agreement on transit between Russia and the region of Kaliningrad, and the statement on Russia-EU relations, Russia-Lithuania intergovernmental agreement on a simplified transfer documents. From time to time, they voice ideas of some kind of a complete external blockade of the Kaliningrad region to harshen up control over the waters of the Baltic Sea and to make impediments to the international shipments, given the degrading economic situation in the Baltic countries, and their welfare depended on the relations with Russia and the Kaliningrad region, and they lost these opportunities not because our country wanted to deprive them of these opportunities, but because they did it to themselves. And it comes as no surprise. Some of our former partners wanted to make things better for themselves in order to fuel tension in the Baltic region. Probably somebody gets money for this job and they stay afloat because of that. We believe that such steps are aggressive, and we take seriously that. Russia has repeatedly claimed that we're ready to provide security to the Kaliningrad region by all means affordable and accessible. An important message was something that was voiced during the direct line in December 2025, namely the warning by President Putin. And he said there is an escalation of the conflict, and there will be an escalation should the Kaliningrad region be blocked.
Apart from the celebration on the 9th of April of another anniversary of the storm of Königsberg, there is one more historical landmark date. That's the Kaliningrad region appearance, and it has become a tourist center of our country, despite unfavorable external circumstances. Artificially created just actually by mad political figures of the European Union and Brussels, who are just mad with their anger. Our region continues to dynamically develop and overcome the existing difficulties. With the support of the federal authorities, we have many events planned for this anniversary, with the participation of cultural figures and representatives from foreign states. So thank you very much for your question. We will publish further materials on this issue on our online resources. And now I congratulate our compatriots, our citizens, and the leaders of the Kaliningrad region. I congratulate you on this anniversary, and we wish you successful celebrations, and we are in touch, taking into account the international political context I have mentioned today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is author I with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Ruslan Pankratov, author I. We have one question today, and it's about the UAVs flying over Baltic states in order to strike deep into the Russian Federation territory. On the 21st of March, Dmitry Peskov warned of appropriate measures if Ukrainian army drones are flown over the Baltics. So the drones continue to fly, and the Baltic states citizens say they are allegedly not aware of anything, and they are unable to detect such drones with their radars. And there is a conspirological version that those drones, maybe they are not flying over, but launched from the territory of those states. So could you share your point of view on this situation and measures? So certainly we consider drone incidents as terrorist attacks against the Russian Federation. Attacks on the Russian Federation, its industrial and civilian facilities, and if those third countries are providing and have provided their territory for enemy drone flights, and we're sure they are fully aware of the risks they are exposed to. For more detailed information, of course, regarding the reaction based on drone flights, I would recommend to consult the relevant agencies. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is the Voice of the Fatherland with us? Yes, Voice of the Fatherland is here. Hello, Madam Zakharova. Yes, hello. France, Great Britain, and other European NATO member countries have recently demonstrated their insubordination to the United States of America, represented by Trump, in their hostilities in the Middle East against Iran. This could be the expression of European sovereignty, or maybe self-preservation. Could there be some orchestrated play, NATO split, in order to protect the United States in the conflict planned by them, conflict between Europe and Russia? Yes, maybe we should seek for the roots in another place. It's the EU countries and collective Brussels. They just support the policy of American ultra-liberals. They do not hide that. They share those values. They are engaged in propaganda of that frenzy, gender-destroying, satanic madness. It's they have just alleged their readiness to comply with that anti-humane, anti-social ideology. So we should seek the reply to your question here. Another issue, who has made you believe this idea that this solidarity within NATO, this solidarity actually exists? Who made you believe that solidarity is some internal call, it's voluntary will to help, to be nearby, even despite the circumstances? What we see in NATO is some patent system. Now it's also collecting money, what Belgium Prime Minister has mentioned. Within the EU, for them it's to choose between happy vessels and unhappy slaves. They were talking about vessel subordination or slavery with regard to the United States of America, but you're talking about solidarity. Solidarity is among the equal. It's equal rights, and not subordination through force and because of the lack of some freedom. Thank you. Thank you. And my second question. If European NATO countries have the sovereignty, some common sense, independence, but no, I have just replied the question. But in my first question, it was not about solidarity, so thank you for the reply to this question. Thank you. If you have no more questions, I'm just checking once again. Goodbye. Until next time, wish you all the best. So we have questions. For some reason, we're not in the list. News.ru. How would you comment on the fact that on the 2nd, 3rd of April, France, together with China, blocked the UN Security Council resolution that would allow to open the Strait of Hormuz? Is it possible to regard this move as a an example of pragmatic engagement. So, as you have said, Russia and China blocked. Yes, on the 2nd, 3rd of April, France, along with Russia and China, blocked in the UN Security Council the resolution, Arab initiative that would allow the use of force to open the Strait of Hormuz. Can we regard this move by Paris as an example of pragmatic engagement with Russia and China despite existing disagreements? So we'll just clarify this issue. What is meant? Our approach to the Bahrain resolution draft, I have mentioned it at the beginning of the briefing. Yes, we have actually blocked this draft, and the Chinese representative also took the same stance. France did not join this approach. That's the first answer to your question. And now the second part is some tactical preferences of Paris. As you have said, not solidarity, but cooperation, engagement. We should not mention it here because the French government adds money and weapons to the Kiev regime, supplies it, and it is used for terrorist purposes against civilian population. We have never heard from Mr. Macron, the French president, and his Minister of Foreign Affairs, his government, any words of compassion, solidarity, or support with regard to the killings of civilian population of our country. That's the answer to your question. That's the position of the current French regime. So let us not fantasize, but have a look at the facts and be based on those facts in our statements and not remain in illusions. We have the reality. Thank you very much.
you.